Welcome, folks, to the 610th edition of the Boxing Asylum Nuthouse. You can catch us at 8 o'clock on Sundays in the UK, 12 noon Pacific time in the US. Once the time changes, that should be next week, I do believe. Going intro free this week because didn't expect this one. We lost a man who absolutely qualifies for the word legend. It's something that might get thrown out a little too much anymore, but when it came to Big George Foreman, legend fits. He was a U.S. Olympian, gold medalist. He was titleist in the 70s, knocked out Joe Frazier when he seemed absolutely unbeatable, and he did it in a couple quick rounds. He retired after a few years after the Rumble in the Jungle with Ali, and went into preaching. And the return of George Foreman was all because he wanted to have a few exhibitions in his mind to make money for his church. And that foray back into the ring when he was around 40 ended up somehow with him in front of the first Southpaw heavyweight champion in the history of the sport, Michael Moore, in a fight where Foreman probably hadn't won a round up until the time of the stoppage, and maybe people were thinking he was getting knocked around a bit too much. George Foreman, who had been spending the winter chopping wood, building up them forearms so he could land one real good right hand, landed one real good right hand, and found himself heavyweight champion of the world again. He defended the title a few more times, got robbed of it, in many people's opinion, against Shannon Briggs, and that was a career. But George Foreman was an incredibly special man, an incredibly special fighter, and we were just lucky that someone like that ended up on our side of the street in the world of boxing. The world is changing. The world is strange, and so many of us wrap ourselves in nostalgia. And someone like George Foreman is the nostalgia of the world that I grew up in and the world that I remember. One of those figures that was larger than life and came out of this period in the United States waving an American flag at the Olympics when he didn't have to as a black man, and we would have understood it. But he was a proud man. He was a patriotic man. He was a man of God, and he was a big piece of this sport that we call boxing for a period of around 30 years in the ring, then after announcing for HBO. But he's gone now, never to be replaced. Never will be another like him. So rest in peace, Big George Foreman. Des, why don't you give us your thoughts on this man that we have lost this week? We'll obviously we have plenty of time. We don't need to make it short and sweet. We obviously have plenty of time for Big George, so go right ahead.
I discovered a lot about George Foreman because of my infatuation with Muhammad Ali. And finding out so much about Muhammad Ali, I fell in love with Joe Frazier. I fell in love with George Foreman. I fell in love with Larry Holmes. I fell in love with Sonny Liston. I fell in love with that era. George was one of the greatest fighters to come out of the greatest era. And that says it all, doesn't it? George, the Olympic champion in '68, who boxed pro across 4 different decades. Go back to his pro debut in 1969. By 1973, he was fighting the formidable Joe Frazier, and he was out in Jamaica, in Kingston, a national sporting arena out there, and he stopped him in 2, and the world stopped. This gigantic, this supersized, surly, burly, moody heavyweight had dethroned Smoking Joe in the most spectacular style. And of course, that led on to the Rumble in the Jungle, which is its own story. I want to just touch on that first chapter, that turning pro to the Rumble in the Jungle, because I learned a lot about George Foreman in that time, and I learned George Foreman said things about that period of his life that I still think about today, and I use to some people, and I say it to some people because George went through an awful lot as a person. He said once, after the Rumble in the Jungle, I fell into a deep hole, and when I came out, I found God. And he described it as a breakthrough, not a breakdown. And that sums George up. He was never down. It was a breakthrough. George was once asked about his meanness and his surliness. And he said, well, I learned from the best. And by that, he meant he trained with the great Sonny Liston, from the amateurs right the way through into the pros. And that relationship came about because they always put Sonny Liston around smaller people. He was always training with smaller fighters, and that was to give the illusion that Sonny was this big bear, this big monster. But behind closed doors, Sonny Liston's manager, Dick Sadler, he asked George to come in when George was still an amateur and said, we want a big guy to try and move Sonny around. And that's where the friendship blossomed. Now, George done some weeks with Sonny Liston, and then he went off to Mexico, won his gold, turned pro, and he based himself with Sonny Liston. And it's a beautiful story because Sonny didn't trust a lot of people, and Sonny had his own demons. But in George, he found a bit of a friend. He found somebody he could talk to. And George told this wonderful story of Sonny was very embarrassed about not being able to read and write. He didn't like people knowing. In fact, he'd confront people if they put him into a corner. If they spoke about it, he would be very aggressive. And George understood this, and he was very, very sensitive around it. And then one day, Sonny came up to George with a contract and said, would you mind helping me with this contract, George? Would you just read it out to me? And George knew he couldn't read it himself, so he read it out. Then he gave it back to Sonny, and Sonny said, yeah, that's what I thought, he said, George. Thanks for your help. And George said that was Sonny's way of saying he trusts me. He doesn't mind me knowing. When George got beat by Ali, and if you haven't seen it, if anybody hasn't seen that brilliant docu-film, When We Were Kings, it's all about the Rumble in the Jungle, and it's a brilliant film. I'd recommend anyone to watch it. You saw how troubled George Foreman was because George had come into 70s boxing, and Ali, Liston, Joe Louis, they'd done the heavy lifting racially. They'd gone through 50s and 60s America, which was the civil rights era, and they'd done all the heavy lifting. Ali had changed his name. He didn't go to Vietnam. Ali had come back, and love him or hate him, people respected Ali. He was that figure. And George, he became a bit of a bridesmaid, and he wasn't loved by his own people because that love went to Muhammad Ali. And out in Zaire, when there was tens of thousands of Africans cheering for Ali, and George was just a bystander, it troubled him. After that fight, George had some notable wins. He beat Fraser again in the return. But after getting beat by Jimmy Young in 77, Foreman thought, I'm done with boxing. And I'll never forget this quote. He said, when I retired, I didn't have a good night's sleep, and I didn't enjoy a meal for about 2 years. And then all of a sudden, it changed. And he found God. He became a man. He was spiritual, and he was a man of God. And you're quite right, Matty. He just thought he'd come back because his money was running out and he wanted to fund his church. So he thought he'd do a few exhibitions. And he kept winning and he was so active, like 5 fights a year, 6 fights a year. And this is when it got interesting. And this is when the second chapter of this brilliant man's career took shape. He ended up being #1 contender for the heavyweight championship of the world. And I remember reading the Teddy Atlas book. And Teddy was Michael Moore's trainer at the time. And Teddy said, when George walked into the press conference, he brought with him the greatest era of heavyweight boxing. And he understood it. He knew when to snarl. He knew when to smile. He knew when to be charming and charismatic. And he knew when to be mean and nasty. And if you haven't read Teddy Atlas's book, I recommend it. It's a brilliant book. And Teddy says, George, he was such a psychological monster. He understood how to get into your head. And that fight was a redemption opportunity for George. He wore the same shorts that he got beat in against Muhammad Ali in the Rumble in the Jungle.
And he had just lost to Tommy Morrison in the fight prior. This would be this is his third chance at the title since he came back, I think.
This wasn't meant to be George Foreman's night, but he made it his night. It was his redemption. And Teddy Atlas said he watched George take Michael's soul in that press conference. And there was a moment when they squared up and Michael Moore had the sunglasses on. And George Foreman, in that lovely accent, lovely voice he had, he said, why are you wearing sunglasses, Michael? Are you scared I'm going to see your eyes? Are you scared I'm going to see the fear? And Teddy Atlas said he watched Michael Moore shrink. And that night, in 1994, you're right, George lost every round. But what he said was, there's going to come a point when Michael Moore stands in front of me. And when he does, I will land. And George was trying to line him up. He was trying to straighten him up all night. And Michael Moore was just stepping off. And then he squared up. And George had already missed with that straight right hand. But he got a second opportunity. And if I go to one video a month to make me smile, it's George Foreman knocking out Michael Moore. And the crowd's appreciation and the commentary's appreciation and the way the whole world of boxing collectively got behind George enough to say, there's your redemption, George. We know how hard the Rumble in the Jungle was. We know what you went through. You've got it back now. And by this time, I think George Foreman had become the Olympic boxer, the heavyweight boxer, the returning heavyweight boxer, the 2-time world champion, the business mogul, the pastor. George was always smiling. He was happy. And the world was happy for him. I think the best way I can describe George Foreman, and it's so fitting, I think George Foreman is probably in everyone's top 3 favourite heavyweights. You might prefer Muhammad Ali. He might be your guy. Maybe Mike Tyson's your guy because you come from that era. Some people, they're behind Tyson Fury. I get it. But everybody will accept Big George is our guy too. We're fans of Big George Foreman. He was the original big man. He was the athlete. He was the puncher. He was the moody, sullen one. But now he's the big teddy bear. And it was a great loss for not just boxing, but for sport, because there is a genuine icon, a genuine legend. And that word does get used too frequently. But with George, it fits. So George Foreman, the Olympic champion, the 2-time heavyweight champion, the businessman, the preacher, the spiritual man, and probably everyone's favorite 3 heavyweights of all time. One of the greatest to come from the greatest era. From everyone at the asylum, R.I.P. George.
That was a nice retrospective there, Des. I liked that a lot. Foreman on his comeback, it was interesting after he got the title from Moore. He had 4 defenses, I think. After that, he took a couple of O's in the process there. Some folks believe that he definitely deserved to lose to Axel Scholz, and then in the last fight of his career, they most people believe he absolutely did not deserve to lose to Shannon Briggs. But and then he walked away from the sport gracefully. He learned it's what are you going to do? He lived a heck of a life. The sport of boxing giveth and it taketh away. So does the Lord. And he found himself on HBO and some great calls with Lampley and Merchant. It was just George was a part of there's very few people who are actively a part in the memories of multiple generations, especially when it comes to athletes. Because, usually with an athlete, by the time you're 35 or so, you're done. And any second act you have is maybe going to be in coaching or maybe commentary if you're lucky. The idea that a man, retired, after losing to Jimmy Young in 77, 78, that he would come back and he would not only create memories, just for being around, but he had it in a second life as a heavyweight champion. It's one of those remarkable things that there's very few comparisons to in the world of sports. Foreman's second act in boxing was tremendous. And he did it all while, not losing sight, not giving up. Again, on his comeback, he lost to Evander Holyfield. He lost to Tommy Morrison the fight before he took the belt from Michael Moore. This guy, his second run was absolutely brilliant. And it's a blessing that people got to see him from another generation in another incarnation. But Justin, why don't you go ahead and give us your thoughts on the life and times of Big George Foreman?
Yeah, I like a lot what Des said, and it's funny because a lot of people, especially in life now, is losses, and you can't do this, and you can't lose that. But him losing in life is actually why he had a life. You understand? I think people get what I'm trying to say. It's him losing that Ali fight, him losing to Jimmy Young is when his life turned. Like this, that's when he kind of like realized, and the Lord, he found Jesus, and he changed his life, because George said to a lot of people that he was a bad guy. He wasn't a good man growing up. When he fought Ali, he said, "I wasn't a good man." He
and
said,
when
"I
you're
was
like that, you don't have to be a nice guy when you're built like George Foreman. You don't have to be.
No, he said he hated. He was a very militant man. He said, "I hated a lot of things." He said, I was cruel to people. He said he just wasn't a nice person, and it is. And so I think it was amazing how he just was able to, turn his life around and be something different, open his eyes. And then when he come back, people made fun of him. Well, look at the guys you're fighting. Look at these and he was fighting random guys. He knew but George didn't lie about what he was doing. Like you said, he wanted the money.
But then who did he fight in 1988 that proved he was not fucking around?
I remember he fought Burt Cooper. He fought
Carl Wee was 88.
And see, Foreman said when he come back, I had to fight at least 10 or 15 guys. He said, because I was not in shape and ready to be a heavyweight fighter at that time. And what he did by coming back, I don't think that's ever going to happen in boxing ever again, where a guy comes back after that long of a layoff in his 40s pretty much and do what he did. I don't think we'll ever see that again, where a man can come back and do that at this level. But it's funny, as soon as I found out that George Foreman died, and I'm the only one that probably it crossed their mind about this, was, do you remember a heavyweight named Friday Ohanatu?
Vaguely, and that's only because his name is so bizarre.
Yeah. When George Foreman was doing his fight, and I could not help it. It was so funny. Every time that Friday landed a punch. George was like, my man Friday, my man. He kept saying it, and you picture George, and you picture George's like, his loud, how his voice was, and how it's just so funny. He just kept laughing. He's like, oh, there you go, my man Friday. I can't. And so every time to this day, when I hear George Foreman's name, that's the first thing that crosses my mind is him making that call, the my man Friday call. I love Big George. I think most people younger age don't know a lot about George. They might know the grills, but I think, he's definitely more of our generation age-wise of what we know. And like Des said, you might be an Ali guy, but Foreman would play in any era. Old and young Foreman would play in any boxing era. And I'm telling you right now, if you put the Foreman that fought Ali, and Ali was just one of those nights where Ali played him. He just played him. He took all that aggression, and we all know how that worked. He just played him. Ali just absolutely outfought him. But you take that version of Foreman. How many heavyweights legitimately in the last 20 years would have beat George Foreman? That version, the young or old, especially the young. And yeah, Big George was a great
Foreman
guy.
Over
Was
12 rounds.
A beast.
Over 12 rounds, Foreman would have caught Usyk. I fucking
and then
tell you.
Oh yeah,
He would have caught Usyk over 12.
And what I love about the older George is that he changed his whole style. He couldn't be the same bull he was when he was younger, and he knew that. He used that freaking jab, which was unstoppable. But I remember that call versus Michael Moore. You remember Teddy Atlas kept telling him, do not engage with him. Do not stand. You have to move. Do not stand with him. And he did and got knocked out. I mean, Teddy Atlas, you can see Teddy Atlas's face on the replays was like, what the fuck? I just told you, do not stand and try to do that. And George is just, and also, George's life, he's got to thank Evander Holyfield for turning down the grill.
Hulk Hogan, too.
Hulk Hogan, yeah, because I already think it'd have been the Real Deal Grill.
I think that was been the name. Yeah.
Yeah, it had to be something like that. But yeah, Hulk Hogan. So I mean, George, he was a great guy. All his kids were named George. Was kind of weird. You remember Frida Foreman? She was on King of Hill, that show.
She could fight a bit.
Yeah, she was good. So he had a great life. He reinvented himself in a way, which is hard to do. He made his money. He was just, I don't know. I didn't see it coming. You're right. I was surprised like everybody else because, I guess you don't see any death coming. But George Foreman has just always been a part of my boxing life since I started boxing. And he's always been around. Like he was at a show or he was announcing.
It is
because I knew George Foreman. Like you always felt like you knew him, like because he was just so in depth with our lives. And when he lost to Tommy Morrison, I didn't think he would. I think a lot of people had definitely wrote him off then. Morrison, of course, Tommy Morrison fought a completely different fight that night than anybody thought he would. Tommy Morrison actually boxed on the back foot, which nobody thought he was going to do that. But so for him to come back and then beat Michael Moore, I don't think the story just kept getting rewrote. The comeback, it stalled. It looked like it was over. Then it come back again. Then it was over again. Then it come back again. So yeah, Big George. Look at the guys he beat. He beat he actually beat up Frazier twice. He beat him up. He beat Ken Norton, which is not easy to do. The man had Olympian, like Des said, there's stuff that you could say that George Foreman didn't do. He was a great person, a great fighter, a great businessman. Apparently, I've heard a lot of people say he was a great dad. He just a great friend. He did it all. And so, yeah, I think we lost a good one. And I'm like you. It does bug you because, I wouldn't say it hurt, but it got me more than I thought it would when I started talking about it. I didn't think I'd be as upset because, he wasn't but you kind of look at him as your boxing family. I know. I guess that's the best way to put it. He was part of my boxing family. And so, yeah, it upsets you.
This might sound weird. I turned 40 this year, and even when you're 40, it's cool to have people to look up to. It's cool to have heroes, you know. And George Foreman, I don't know. He was just from a time in a generation where the good men just seem to be so much better. You know, the pieces of shit, we get into that from here to Kingdom Come, but the good men from that era, they were just built out of something different. I there was, and he's just. Let me close with this little thing as far as George goes, and it's interesting. Maybe this will touch Americans more than others, but a friend of mine posted this up after I had just done a little rest in peace on my Facebook. This is something that George Foreman had said, probably getting on 10 years ago at this point in time, but George said, "There will always be a place for protest. Once you find a country that does not have protest, then you just need to get on a boat and go somewhere else. When you don't have protest or people making statements, get out." That was George Foreman during the Colin Kaepernick uprisings in the United States, as they were so called. So there's a lot more to this man than meets the eye. There's a whole lot more than we could ever talk about in such a period of time. But he's part of the tapestry of boxing. He is part of the tapestry of American history and American culture after World War II. You know, how many athletes can say that? So God love you, George Foreman. Thank you for all the incredible memories that you gave us inside and outside of the ring. And in this case, I am confident in saying there will never, ever be another like you again. So to the friends, family of George Foreman, our condolences. We could never give to him what George gave to us as boxing fans. But it's been a very rough week. That is one of three. Des, you guys have lost a very respected boxing journalist over there too, someone that you had personal interactions with. Why don't you go ahead and continue the condolences train here?
Well, we lost famed boxing writer Colin Hart this weekend, and I've got to give you some context for how important Colin and his work was for a lot of us, particularly in the 80s and the early 90s. This was before we had the internet. There was no YouTube journalism. There was no 24 hours internet where you could type in the latest news feeds. There was no podcasts. If you go back, if you can, I'm old enough to go back to the 80s where we had a newspaper every day, and you had the boxing news once a week, and you had boxing monthly once a month, and you hung out for a bit of boxing news. And Colin wrote a weekly article for one of the newspapers, and Colin was old school. He would get to know the fighters and go around their houses, have cups of tea, get to know their wives and their kids. He understood them and he respected them. He was one of them. And in doing that, you got to know the managers and, of course, the promoters, and you hung around gyms. And it was probably one of the greatest jobs in the world for a boxing fan, which Colin was. And he was surrounded by icons of British boxing, whether it's Harry Carpenter, Reg Guttridge. He was surrounded by people that were very, very good at their job. So Colin had to be good at his. There was no cheap shots. There was no fawning over a fighter. There was no doing promoters favours. Colin played it straight down the middle. And for guys in the 80s and the early 90s, before the internet revolution, before 24-hour news feeds, before the asylum, and before all the other podcasts, before we had YouTube journalists posting 50 videos a month, Colin's article, along with the guys in the boxing news, that was our weekly staple of boxing gossip, of understanding the shape fighters was in, what their next move might be, who they're going to be boxing next. years and years after I started reading Colin's articles, he used to park his car in the car park at Upton Park, which is where West Ham used to play their football matches. And I had a fiddle with one of the security, and somehow, I had my car parked next to him every other week. And we'd often meet in the car park, walk round to our gate, and all we did was talk boxing. And this was Colin was a lot older now, and sometimes his memory wasn't great, and he was a little bit unsteady on his legs, but he was always sharp as a tack around boxing. He was always so courteous. He was a gentleman. He was old school London, and it was a pleasure to know him. It was a pleasure to spend time with him. I used to enjoy his work, and he's one of the old school. And I'm sorry he's gone, and condolences to Colin's family. May he rest in peace.
Well, thanks for that. It's great when you get to meet some of these people and develop a relationship over your shared love of something. You know, it's uncommon to get those opportunities.
I like what Dad said on is sometimes, you know, we all like that you could get all the media now. You get all the news in like 5 seconds. But there was something about when you had to wait on it and you had to actually read the newspaper and you had to, like, what it's just sometimes maybe it's just me being nostalgic, but I miss those times because you, like Dad said, you knew who your local sports writer was. You waited for those articles. It's just, maybe, I don't know, maybe that's just me being nostalgic, but I kind of miss those times when you had to get the magazine and you waited for that to come in the mail and you waited for your Ring magazine to come and you had to go to the store and buy it. And like, that was, I kind of miss those times somewhere, you know, I always kind of miss those sometimes. But when it was just, I don't know, maybe that's just me being nostalgic, but I do kind of miss those days at times.
Yeah, there's something wrong about when in this age. I mean, it's great to have all this information at our fingertips, but what do we use it for? You know, it I don't know. We basically just use the information we get now as sludge to hurl at fighters and promoters. And it's, you know, 24-hour news cycle with boxing. There's just so much there. But anyhow, Justin, now the third person we lost this week was a fantastic fighter during the 80s. A couple of wins over.
Matthew. I'm very sorry to interrupt you.
Yes.
I just want to interrupt the flow of the remembrances before you move on to the next person. I just wanted to jump in on Colin Hart. As I heard you moved over there, I just missed what Des was saying, but I just wanted to jump in on Colin. So again, sorry to interrupt the flow of condolences. I just wanted to say Colin was someone who I got to know through my work in the boxing sphere, and I was made known of Colin's ill health about, I think, a week or so ago. A mentor of mine, Wally, had let me know that Colin was unfortunately ill. And it was obviously hearing that news is a shame because myself and a couple of the other younger journalists, and sometimes I guess, I don't know, maybe I wouldn't call myself a journalist, reporter. In this sphere, sometimes we get labeled with wanting to, I suppose, get views all the time and get kind of, you know, the content now and quick as possible and move on to the next thing. But myself and John Nagyoff, who works for ProBoxing Fans, always found it a joy to see Colin at the shows, and we'd, I guess, rudely interrupt Colin's viewing of the shows at ringside to go grab him to get backstage just to hear his thoughts on boxing. Him and Jeff Powell like really enjoy their kind of takes on things because obviously they're from a different era and different view. Obviously they view boxing from a different lens, having experienced so much more and absorbed so much more through the years than we had. So we'd always kind of make a thing to try and, whenever Colin was there, just try and grab him, make sure we've got him, because he was just so fun and interesting and to speak to. John used to do this thing with Colin You can check it on Pro Boxing Fans. We'd ask Colin about a fight that he'd been to and just ask his memories of it. So do go check that out if you'd like to just get a little insight into Colin. I think as well, Talksport have done like a bit of a This Is Your Life walkthrough with him as well. So that's something I've not quite seen just yet. So I'll be picking up on that as well too. But he was someone who he'd always had the time of day for everyone. Had a real quick wit as well about him, and still enjoyed watching the boxing even up until the last few weeks. It's been a while since I remember him seeing him at a show. But I think it was Joyce versus Chisora was the show. Excuse me, 1 second. Joyce versus Chisora was the show I saw him last at. But like I mentioned, we'd always want to kind of see him and grab him. I heard of Colin's ill health, and I'd rang his number just to check in on him. I didn't know how kind of far into his illness he was, but a family member of his had picked up the phone and let me know kind of he wasn't in the best of states, and myself and John would kind of be talking about it, and we thought maybe we could go see him if possible, but that unfortunately wasn't a possibility. He was not in the best of states, of course. But yeah, the lady who I spoke to gave me an email and said, look, for the family and for Colin at the time, he was, although he was still able to, I guess, acknowledge messages and things. She said, look, if you want to send in your messages and things like that, he's able to read them. And also for comfort of the family as well, too, if you want to send anything in, just let me know. And I took down her email. So if anyone wants to send any condolences or stories or anything they know of Colin or anything that's kind of touched them, just get in touch with me via social media, and I'll pass on the email if you'd like to do so. I'm sure the family will appreciate it. But just in terms of myself as well, just touching on my interactions with him, he was always really personable, always really forthcoming, never really had a bad word to say about this kind of generation. He seemed to embrace this generation's new age of media, I guess. It was funny because I remember talking to him about kind of phones and things like that, and he said, I've not got one of those, I've got this old flip phone, and that's all I need. I had it for a number of years. He very much loved I guess his tech, but he seemed to embrace kind of like the zone boxing, those apps and that sort of culture. Seemed to really kind of get on board with those sort of things and saw it as the way forward for boxing. And he never found him really like all that abrasive, but never one to hold back on his thoughts. Like we would be in the midst of, I guess, Tyson Fury's going into his attempt at winning the undisputed against Alexander Usyk, and for the back of that into the second one, he'd very much be forthright with what he thought about Fury or the heavyweights of this generation compared to generations prior. So his kind of take on boxing, his no punches pulled kind of his approach will be missed, and he definitely will be missed amongst us kind of younger reporters who very much in amongst all the stars that you see at shows and people that you got to get and you got to queue up for. He was very much one that as soon as we saw that he was there, we knew that we had to get him and had to speak to him because we just enjoyed that conversation with him. So hope he's enjoying boxing up above, and hopefully to some degree we can keep on his approach in boxing, because I certainly will miss him into it.
Well, if you're in the afterlife, Ali Foreman 2 is officially on the table. So, hopefully folks get to see that, there's got to be some good stuff going on up there, you'd think. But, but rest in peace to Colin Hart. So obviously seemed to be a juggernaut of British boxing journalism and beloved by many. Now, Justin, we lost a guy, shared the ring with Mancini, beat him twice. Lost to Roberto Duran in a fight of the year candidate once upon a time. Talking about Livingston Bramble, I believe at the age of 61. But he was a guy who very skilled, as we were discussing before the show, probably fought too long, but you got to wonder, somebody like that, put him in the ring, 15 years ago or something like that, what he might have been able to do, because he was a real fighter in an era of absolutely incredible boxers. And it's a shame to have lost him. And one of those names that probably has gone by the wayside over the years.
Yeah, it's. I'm not sure how many people. I'm sure a lot of people listening know Livingston Bramble, but he's kind of a hardcores type guy. You have to really, like we do, and I love boxing history, so I've went back and watched all these fights. The Duran, I've watched the Mancini, and I was a big Kostya Tszyu fan, so he was one of those guys that was brought down to Australia to kind of give Kostya Tszyu a name. They wanted a champion, so they brought Bramble in. He fought Obakar, almost knocked Obakar off when he was considered a really high-level Kronk prospect. And I always say this, if you can be a champion at lightweight anywhere around that area in the late 80s, you're going to play anytime, any generation, because those were the best of the best. So if you're winning titles at that time period in those weight classes, you could fight today in your prime, and you're going to be fighting for championships because those guys play. The skill set. He was a lesser known guy because he was from St. Kitts and Nevis. I don't know if people know, but that's a very small island in the Caribbean. So he wasn't a guy from like Chicago or had this big backing from Philadelphia. So he never really got the big push. He had a pretty good style. Mancini, he was supposed to actually, he was a huge underdog in the Mancini fight because Mancini was setting up a fight with Camacho. That was the whole thing. So Bramble was a spoiler. He ruined all that. And he knocked Mancini out in the 14th round. So that was a great win. Then he come back and beat Mancini in a close decision. I think he defended the title 3 or 4 times. Then he lost to Edwin Rosario. I know people know Edwin Rosario.
And he was supposed to fight Camacho, and Rosario played the role that he did against.
Yeah. He fought a lot of guys. And like I said, I think me and you talked about this. I would love to start doing maybe even if it was just, and I'm sure Dez knows all these guys too, like a 10 minutes every once in a while on just the lesser known guys that people don't know about that they should appreciate if they went back and looked at them. I've gotten into, I watch random stuff. I can't help it. I love watching the old boxing. So I got on a Simon Brown kick. Not many people know who Simon Brown is. He was a 3-weight champion. He fought Terry Norris. He fought Tony. He was from Jamaica, a random guy. And those are the guys that I love watching. And I just love bringing history to people that maybe don't know who all the guys are. Go back and look. But that's one thing I love about this podcast is I'm going to say the majority of people listening right now know these names and know who these guys are. But Bramble he had a good run. Like we said, he was the poster boy for a guy that went about 5 or 6 years too long. But that just happens when you come from a poor country and you don't have a lot of backing. But yeah, rest in peace. This is a guy that if you want to go back, watch the Mancini fights. They were good. Watch the Duran fight. But yeah, I always like guys like that. Like I said, he'll play any era.
Absolutely. Let's see. Ames, do you have any thoughts on Livingston Bramble? They take you back there, back before you were even born, I think, for most of his fights.
Actually, you have to come back to me in a bit because I'm just choking on some food.
You're fine. Yeah, Des, any thoughts from you on Livingston Bramble? Another guy, George died at a reasonable age. 61 is a bit too soon, unfortunately.
Yeah, Livingston was one of them guys that had boots, had gum shield, will travel. And he was, remind me of the kid that Floyd Mayweather boxed, the Drunken Master, and Roger
Emmanuel Augustus, originally Emmanuel Burton.
That's the type of guy Livingston Bramble was. He was very talented. He was hard to beat. He was more than a world-class gatekeeper, but he was the sort of guy that if you wanted to get rid of a fighter, you brought in Livingston, or if you wanted to see how good a fighter was, you brought in Livingston. A good fighter in his own right with some fantastic names on his record. Went on too long, obviously, but boxing is all he knew. Where's he going to go? He's a lifer, like a lot of them. And Livingston was colourful. He was a character, but he had to be because he didn't sell a ticket. He wasn't from a Chicago or Philadelphia. He wasn't from Brooklyn. He was from a very small island in the Caribbean. And Livingston was a very colourful, talented character in boxing, and Justin nailed it. When you can navigate through that minefield of the 80s and the 90s and that weight class, picking up titles, beating Hall of Famers, you were definitely a talent. You definitely had something. And it's only right that we remember Livingston Bramble on this pod, because this is a boxing pod. And as much as we all remember George Foreman and Colin Hart, we must never forget that Livingston Bramble's a boxing either. R.I.P. Livingston.
Yeah, absolutely. And to be respectful of the man's memory, I don't want to not acknowledge his name as he has passed, because he did change it. I assume he might have converted. But Ross E. Ajoie Bramble. And I'm sure I'm saying that wrong, but it's closer than Livingston. Yeah, God bless you and your family. May you find something better in the next life than what is going on right now. Yeah, anyways, before we get into all of our previews here, Ames, do you want to say anything about George Foreman? Because I think that would be the only one that you wouldn't have had a chance to touch on.
Yeah. Sorry, I just had some food go down the wrong way.
You went to the chip shop. I know exactly what you fucking did. You got curry sauce on it, and I know exactly what you're fucking doing. The chippy.
If he'd used the grill, he wouldn't have choked, because all that fat would have gone out, and it'd have been better for him. That's it.
Yeah.
Have you come to the UK in May?
No, I have never been to the UK. I've been talking to you Brits for the last 20 years, though. I know what goes on there. I know.
You've been talking to us Brits for the last 20 years. You've not received one invite. Get the hint?
No, I've gotten plenty of invites. I just can't afford to go over there. Do you know how much fucking flights are? It's stupid.
Well, if you do come over, we'll treat you to a chippy.
I spent 1 week I went 1 week in the UK, and it was fun.
Where'd you go?
We went to London, then we went up. I don't know why we ended up in Birmingham. The guy we were with, he knew some friends up there from school. And, went out to like Oxford, because another guy did like a summer program there. We went to a Sutton United soccer game, which is some random teams. We toured West Ham. That's a whole other story. I don't remember half of it. We had a really good time. Anyway, well, that's me off the pod. I had a great time, actually.
Yeah.
It was a long week.
Glad you did, and I'm glad you came to Birmingham as well. That's given me enough time, I think, to clear my throat. Yeah, you asked me about Livingston Bramble. You mentioned about Livingston like before my time, and that's the case. I just had a look through his box record. I wasn't really a big boxing fan back then, or seen much of Livingston as a fighter, as an opponent. So I don't really want to make comment. Obviously, God rest his soul, and hopefully his family find comfort in his passing. With George Foreman, I mean, similar sort of thing. You guys have kind of said a lot about George. The only thing I want to add is I'm asking you guys. It seemed like George. You look at George as a fighter, and look at George after his career. It almost looks like two completely different people. And I get the feeling with George, he sort of wanted to shed his skin of the boxing. He wasn't really around boxing all that much after his career. Apart from, of course, he was commentating fights. I think he promoted a couple of fights too, but after that, he really kind of faded out from the scene. Apart from the odd appearance, like, would you say that was kind of a fair assessment of George? That he kind of just wanted to shed his kind of that image of being a boxer, I guess.
He wasn't. The only thing that George really liked that was expensive was cars. Like, you don't think like flashy with George. He seems like the kind of guy. He had a ranch and it's just Texas guy. He seemed like he just kind of wanted his peace and quiet kind of stuff like that. Some people some people really get off on the attention and things like that. And I think George appreciated it more in his second act as a pro, but I think that was, if you listen to people talk about George when he was younger, like the gruff thing is, yeah, for a lot of people, but a lot, there's plenty of folks who said he was a good guy. He just didn't really like the spotlight, and it kind of, made him a bit of an asshole at times. But just because you've learned to deal with it with a smile doesn't mean that that's your natural place. And I think George's natural place was just kind of chilling with his family, riding horses and shit like that.
I mean,
And,
you can't really.
his relationship with God too is this isn't a religious podcast, but I don't think you're respecting the man's memory if you don't bring into the peace that his relationship with God brought him.
Very few in heavyweight boxing. You get a lot of imitations, a lot of style imitations. People want to emulate Muhammad Ali. People want to emulate Joe Frazier's type of style. No one really wants to emulate George Foreman because they can't emulate George Foreman. His physique, his prowess, his power, his grit. Not a lot of fighters can really mold after George, because what George brought was near enough the whole package. I think that's the best way I can remember George, is that he is truly, I think, a unique fighter that, I don't know, it will take generations to go past to get something similar to what George brought to the ring.
Yeah. Joe Joyce was trying, but he got punched in the head too many times, and it didn't. And alas, he was no George Foreman, who, and honestly, Des, I kind of, if you think about his loss to Ali and the conditions that they're fighting in, I kind of, if there's any comparison to another loss in professional boxing I'd have to compare it to, it might be when Ray Robinson tried for the 175-pound title against Joey Maxim and just had nothing left after the 12th round, because it was a 15-round fight, and I think it was stopped in 13. I mean, apparently the in-ring temperature that day was like 110 degrees. Like, he just ran out of freaking juice. It was not the type of weather intended for sport.
Yeah, and there's been a few cases of that, isn't there? Ken Buchanan fighting in San Juan in Puerto Rico. Johnny Owen fighting.
Yeah, that's
Lupe
not fair to a
Pinto.
Scotsman, Des. That's not fair to a Scotsman at all.
Or Johnny Owen out in Mexico. Them Celts are not built for that sun. I can only say this about the Rumble in the Jungle, and I sometimes have fruitless conversations with people that tell me things like Mike Tyson was the greatest of all time, or Tyson Fury was the greatest of all time, and I wasn't around to first-hand watch 70s boxing, but I've done enough homework, and I've gone back and I've watched it and rewatched it. You said it earlier on, the 70s heavyweight was built different, and and in so many ways. So George Foreman, Muhammad Ali, Kenny Norton, coming into that group would have been Larry Holmes. Guys that didn't win world titles like Ron Lau, Ernie Shavers, they were built differently to what heavyweights are built today. And Muhammad Ali was arguably one of the top 3 greatest sportsmen has ever lived. And he's got the copyright on some of the most greatest moments in sport. And whether that's refusing to fight in Vietnam, whether that's being banned for 2 years, whether it's the Rumble in the Jungle, the Thriller in Manila, even the iconic fight against Larry Holmes when Dundee pulled him out against his corner's wishes. Ali was the most famous face in boxing, but with that came Joe Frazier, and it came George Foreman. They was each other's dance partners. And Fraser and Ali share their own history, and Foreman and Ali share their own history, and Foreman and Fraser share their own history. So the Rumble in the Jungle was an intricate, important chapter that had to happen so that 40 years, 50 years, 60 years later, guys like us are still talking about them. And Justin made a brilliant point, and it's so profound. George Foreman had to suffer the Ali loss to become the George Foreman of '94. He wore the shorts to prove it. To have that redemption, he had to suffer that loss. I wouldn't change one single day of 1970s heavyweight boxing. It's the greatest era ever. Guys today, the good ones, like the AJs and the Furies and the Usyks, we can only speculate how they would ever have coped with that group. The Kenny Nortons, the Ron Lyles, the Alis, the Frasers, the Foremans, the Holmeses. They were the greatest. And I reiterate what I said about Big George. The winning, the losing, the ups, the downs, the depression, the not enjoying a good night's sleep or a good meal for 2 years, the breaking down and the breaking through, it all had to happen because what we got from George, the end product, was a very successful, very content, very humble, happy man. And I don't think any of us would change George Foreman.
No, not at all. And it's the only thing anywhere comparable to George Foreman in my lifetime is Bernard Hopkins. And believe me, when that fateful day comes that Bernard Hopkins passes away, there's going to be some incredible tributes got to that man, his longevity as well. I mean, they're in a very, very small class of boxers. You got basically, I'm trying to think here, add more, but Archie Moore, George Foreman, Bernard Hopkins. Those three as far as longevity goes. I throw in another one if you can think of them, but I kind of think that's what you got. There you go.
Well, ironically, Matty, not to be overly morbid, but Kenny Norton's left us, Ali's left us, Fraser's left us, Foreman's left us. So the last one of that fantastic five of the 70s is Larry Holmes. And, we're very lucky, us guys. The guys in the chat, the guys on this panel, the people that watch boxing, we're very lucky that we can sort of tap into that. We can still go back and understand what them guys did. And, perhaps when when Larry Holmes goes and you wait 10, 15 years, perhaps them brilliant guys will be consigned to history, like Rocky Graciano and Tony Zhao and Ray Robinson and Ted Kid Lewis. Maybe, we don't talk enough about Joe Louis. We don't talk enough about Rocky Marciano. We don't talk enough about Sonny Liston. We touched on the wonderful Sonny Liston relationship had with George Foreman because George Foreman's passed. Them guys are bringing that history into today. So it's up to pods like this and guys like us and people in our chat and on our group chats, people like Ames that have got a job within the media. It's up to us guys to keep talking these guys' names, keep putting their names out there and reminding people about the Livingston Brambles and the George Foremans and the Sonny Listons and how brilliant they were. And without them guys paving the way, we wouldn't have the guys of today.
Yeah, and they say people who don't learn from history are doomed to repeat it. And like, Jesus, can we please repeat some of this history? Actually, it'd be amazing to have some of this back. But yeah, it was a tough week in the world of boxing, losing an absolute legend, a well-respected former titleist, and a man who clearly has great respect in British boxing journalism. So to George Foreman, Colin, Hart, and the family of Livingston Bramble, rest in peace. But we still had boxing going on this week, and what better way to celebrate the life and times of George Foreman than by going to Australia for a George Kambosos fight against a late notice opponent. And it went 12. And Kambosos won. He looked all right at times, but I'll tell you, if anything really stood out to me with this fight, Justin, it's the fact that I don't think Kambosos is going to be able to hang physically at 140 pounds, because if Jake Wiley was a little bit wilier, a little savvier in the ring, he had a decent right hand. Those 15 knockouts he came into the ring with didn't come from nowhere, and I really thought that with just a little bit more craft, that his size and power was telling the story. And I think I don't expect a career renaissance from Kambosos at 140, long and short of it, after this fight.
I never expected anything out of George Kambosos. I think I made it clear. He's a good talker. I've never been a huge fan, but the actual winner of this fight is Wiley, because he was not expected to do anything being LA, and he actually showed some ability. He has he's the guy that is going to get a lot of opportunities now just because of this. And like you said, I think a lot of it was, at the first few rounds, this was something he wasn't prepared for. And maybe if he had had time to actually really prepare for this fight, he could have beat Kambosos. If he actually had a chance to really plan for it, not just kind of get thrown in. And you're right, Kambosos, I think the size-wise, he took a lot of shots maybe he shouldn't have. And I don't think if he steps up versus any of the top 140 guys, he's not going to have a chance. He's going to give him a fight, but he's not going to beat him. And Wiley is the real winner, because he last second he showed there could be a little bit there. I don't think you're going to back everything behind him, but he's earned, especially in Australia, which they're so they're hurting for stars. They're hurt, especially after Zoo went down. They need people to step up. So I think he's going to get a little push from them. And this only helps his career. He can only go up from this. Kambosos, he can really only go down from this, because he did show that he might be a little too high in weight, and this might not be for him.
I think a decent fight for Jake after this, and not even necessarily a fight that he'd win, but a fight like I think he kind of earned another payday off of it, is I'd imagine Liam Perro would appreciate a domestic dance partner at this point in time, so he doesn't have to go travel around, try to get himself steadied again. So yeah, I could sign up for Liam Perro against Jake Wiley for sure. It's what the hell else am I going to do at 4:30 in the morning and watch Australians punch each other in the face? Let's see, Des, what were your thoughts on this fight? Are we missing anything? Any new wrinkles from Kambosos? Any upside that you saw that was lost upon us mere mortals?
Was this fight made at 140, Matty?
Yeah.
So he's a light welterweight.
Yeah, super light.
Yeah, I think when I look at Kambosos, and this particular type of fight between Wiley and Kambosos, if Australia had, and they probably do have, a national title, like we have the British title, and we've got Bentley and Heaney and Pauls fighting for it in close fights, but one's just ahead of the other, I think this will be the perfect fight for an Australian title. I think Kambosos is really fast, high energy for the first 5-6 rounds. He's not much of a puncher.
He's so slappy with that left hand, Des. He just does not turn it over.
He doesn't have great motor skills, and what he does, he comes round. He doesn't throw straight shots. He throws this lead long left hook, and Jake didn't have the head movement, or didn't understand how to feint. I mean, if Jake had feinted a few times, he would have drawn that long looping, slapping hook out of Kambosos, and then he could have come over the top and counted him. But these two guys are not of that level, not to be disparaging. I understand where they're at. We've got plenty over here, and we get loads of value out of them. Like I said, I could watch Bentley versus Pauls, or Pauls versus Haney, or Bentley, but I could watch that all night, every week. That's not a problem. But I just think Kambosos overachieved with the TO result, and I think he's earned really well off the back of it. I think he's had some super fights off the back of it. He's sold out big arenas in Australia off the back of it. But if I'm honest, I think Kambosos, in our language, in our money, is somewhere between British and European level, and I don't see anything in Kambosos against a kid like Jake Wiley. to make me suggest you're a class above, or you're just knocking on the door at the elite guys at 140. And there's some brilliant fighters at 140. So, you know, I think Kambosos, he started fast, he was high energy. Wiley was predictable, straight lines, didn't feint much, didn't offer much variation, wasn't overly versatile. Then after round 6, Kambosos' energy dropped, the fight leveled off, and we had a fair scrap. It was pretty predictable. It's the sort of thing you get from Joe Laws and Aaron McKenna over here. No great shakes, a decent fight. I'm glad the Australians loved it, but I think Kambosos has found a level, and I think that level is Commonwealth title, maybe if the right one turns up, fighting for a world title, but it would have to be the right kid. And if you look at the guys at 140, it's becoming a very, very competitive, tough division. So, no, wasn't overly impressed, wasn't overly fascinated, but I appreciate it would sell, and I appreciate both kids gave a good account of themselves, but it is a fight of a level.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that assessment. The idea that Kambosos is going to get another title shot off of the back of this against Richardson Hitchens is reasonably laughable to me. Ames, anything I'm missing in that fight?
Sorry, Matty, before we listen to Ames, he doesn't get a bar out of Richardson Hitchens. He doesn't get a moment, a minute of any round against Richardson Hitchens.
No, he doesn't get anything of that.
Would switch him off and stand him on his head. Honestly.
Well, he's a bigger version of Haney. Hitchens is,
yeah, give or take.
And it would be the
more
same
muscular,
fight,
more tougher.
Yeah,
it's
the same.
Right.
It's the same exact fight, and there's no different result what happened in that.
Correct.
Yeah, I have a hard time seeing that fight anything different than 120, 108 Ames. Or maybe a late stoppage even for Hitchens, just because he's the larger guy in Kambosos is coming up in weight. It's relatively just unimpressed with how they just keep recycling Kambosos. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I think you agree with a lot of you guys' assessments. I think just the thing that would put me off of saying that Hitchens might stop him is Kambosos does seem to show that he's got a chin better than you think he would have as well too. He seems to have, and he's got the powers of recovery as well too. What I think is a worry for Kambosos moving forward is in this fight with Jake Wiley. It was only maybe about a minute span, maybe a little bit longer, but the moment where he got cut set about a little bit of panic in Kambosos, and he's got to be like reactive. He's got to go, I got to get back. He's just kind of like, he's in that moment, and he's sort of kind of feeling the blood set down and feeling the kind of urge and impetus of the moment. And I thought for someone who's been to the top, for someone who's had a brilliant night like he had against Tevin Lopez, he had to find longer than I thought he would have to find to compose himself. He got there, but against a lesser opponent, someone coming in on late notice, there was still that panic in him. And I thought that's something to keep an eye on moving forward against bigger and better opponents of the likes of Richardson Hitchens, where those moments might cause a stoppage. But in that, though, I still think he found enough of the composure to get through that moment. And not that it was like a real bad phase for him, but it was just something that really kind of was set in with me when I was just watching that unfold. I thought as well too, he's fast and he's quick, and he's got a little bit not pop, but he seems to be able to put off Wiley a little bit, who maybe it would just been a case of him finding his feet in a moment, of course, as well. But he has that for the first, like Des said, for 4 or 5 rounds, but then that fizzles out, and he's got to rely on his boxing ability and experience, and he's going on about afterwards on social media about how he lived with it up, down to this, that, and the other. And I got this from another legend that I fought before, and digging into his bags of tricks that he's picked up throughout the years, and he has got a lot of that. But at 140 now, I don't see him being someone who can have another like Tevin Lopez. I think he's in tough at a higher weight against the top level talent and the contenders as well too. There might be 1 or 2 fighters who might be able to get the victory against. But anyone who's got any real ambition at the weight should be beating Kambosos, and that's kind of shown as well too with the drop off from. And I mean this with no respect to Max Hughes, who I appreciate greatly for his talents, but Maxi beat him, I believe, in Oklahoma, and someone who has more life left in their career, and someone who had been to where Kambosos has been, like I mentioned before, against Tevin Lopez, wouldn't have come up short, at least for the majority of boxing public's eyes on that night. So I think Kambosos, without him wanting to admit it, without him wanting to say it, is on those last few paydays. If you can get him in Australia, even better, because he can maximize those paydays clearly. But this is someone who I think Eddie signed in lieu of wanting to build him up for his other fighter, have that great fight, and then give him a comeback fight against maybe then his other contender, like Dalton Smith or whatever it is. Or if he sees a bit more life of it, maybe get him a pro-grade fight to build him back up, and then give him to Dalton Smith or a Jack Catterall or something like that. But that's as far as I think Kambosos goes right now, because I just don't see him being able to contend with the other contenders.
Yeah, he's just a step below, it would seem, as far as it goes. You know, and the fight that was, I guess, more surprising in that in Australia was Sky Nicholson losing to TR Brown by a split decision. It was a very interesting fight where Nicholson, every time she decided to slow down, her opponent was there to kind of land something looping and hard. And Nicholson just didn't box enough. And then her legs started getting tired and she wasn't allowed to box. It was a close fight that could have gone either way. And Justin, I'm honestly a little bit surprised that Sky didn't get it just because home country, et cetera, et cetera. But all in all, the judges were, I guess, fair. And they gave it to the American who comes home with a title.
I'm gonna let y'all discuss that fight. I didn't watch it.
Ha!
I watched the Shernika. The only fight I care to talk about is the I'll talk about the Katiev fight, but Katayev, but because that was the best fight on the card. But I will let y'all handle the
sure
two women's fights if y'all want to take that on. I know that's what y'all enjoy, so I'll wait.
Did it? Sometimes I'm the only one that actually ended up watching these.
No, I will agree with you. I did see the final. I did watch the final round or two because I did want to see just the decision, and I am surprised she got it, but I thought she lost. So it's like they come. The judges. There was a couple of bad cards this weekend, but like you said, I think she kind of got outworked at times, and you can't really argue with the decision. I did think she would have got it, but hey, the fans. I think all the fans were stunned. I remember that. I mean, they didn't say anything. They didn't really know what to do. That was definitely not supposed to happen at all. That was not supposed to. I'm sure they'll do some kind of rematch in Australia. I'm sure she'll get it this time. But Nicholson is just the little I have seen. I've not been overly impressed, and she just got outworked.
She's a nice looking gal with a decent amateur boxing style that can get a good number of W's in the pros. I don't know. Not a whole lot to say as far as that goes. It does, Ames. Either one of you, if you have any thoughts on the women's fights, feel free. If not, you go about your day.
I saw the Sky Nicholson one. I saw it this afternoon. Sky's got a very limited set of motor skills. She really is a one-trick pony. She's got this invisible circle around her feet, and when someone steps into it, she steps out of it and throws a jab. And I've seen her be overly reactive and cautious right up to this point in her career. And I thought anyone that's prepared to press Sky Nicholson, get in her face, and take her into an uncomfortable space, we'll find out a little bit about Sky Nicholson's motor skills. It's not about heart or guts or how much you want it. It's just this style she has. It's a low ceiling style. And I think my mate, Dr. FMG, said it last night. It will get caught out against anyone that throws a lot of punches and has got quick feet and just keep pressing and pushing. And you can't keep being this reactive fighter over 10 rounds. Last night, I didn't think she got beat heavy. I thought it could go 6-4 either or. But you've only got to get one or two judges that doesn't like that style and admires the other style. And I think that's what happened last night. It's just what you go for. It wasn't a lot in the two kids, but it's what you go for. And no arguments either way. But I've been waiting for Sky to get caught out because it's a very pedestrian, reactive style. And I didn't like the weigh-in. I said to myself, if this girl is as proactive and as aggressive and as pressing in the fight as what she was in the press conference and the weigh-in, Sky's going to have a really hard 10 rounds. And it worked out that way. So I wouldn't have complained if Sky had got it because it was that type of fight, 6-4. But the judges done the right thing, gave it to the other kids. So did you say it's going to be a return?
I wouldn't doubt it. They didn't say anything particular,
Yeah,
but
it's not,
I mean, with
it's
Eddie,
not a hard
what do you
fight
think?
for Sky. Yeah, it's not a hard fight for Sky, but she's got to be prepared to stay in that pocket and not step backwards and step to the side and pivot off. And when she's pivoting, just throw shots around the side, then step back. But it was just far too predictable, far too reactive, and it caught her out last night. But that style does have a low ceiling.
She was one of countless fighters who did well in the amateurs who was absolutely lacking a quality uppercut.
Yeah, and her inside work doesn't exist, and it's like you say. Look, I'm not saying there's not a place for it, but you've got to add tools to your resume. You've got to build your sets of skills, and I just think Sky's traded off of that one trick she's got, and it's just as you go up in levels, it's not enough. And look, Brown isn't an elite fighter, and not many women can say they are at the moment. It's still finding its feet in the pro game women's boxing. But Sky should have had a bit more about her last night than what she did have. But I'm not taking nothing away for either girl. They brought their styles to the ring, and we saw what we saw. But no complaints. But I was waiting for that style to catch Sky out. And when I saw the presser and I saw the weigh-in, I thought, if this kid is as proactive in the ring as what she is outside of it, Sky's going to have a hard 10 rounds. And that exactly worked out that way.
Well, she had been vocal about wanting Amanda Serrano, and Serrano would beat the shit out of that girl.
Oh, God. Yeah, behave yourself.
Yeah, she would beat the shit out of that girl. So this is probably a far better outcome for her. She could get revenge and just go about a few title defenses, and then getting a fight at home against who is it that's fucking doing okay over at 122? Help me, Ames. Who's the British gal that's doing well at 122 pounds? The boxing journalist has nothing.
Oh, you're on about Scotland?
Yeah, there you go. Thank you. Yeah. That if she got revenge over Brown, that could probably be a fight for Nicholson. That could make money and where she wouldn't get injured by someone like Serrano.
Scotty would ruin Sky Nicholson. I'm not a women's boxing expert, but I've seen enough of Sky and enough of Ellie Scotney to know that you don't put Sky in the same postcode as Ellie Scotney. Scotney would light her up.
Well, man, you never know. She better be nice to Eddie, or she could find herself in a rough situation. It might be illegal to beat your spouse, but if you're a boxing promoter, it's not illegal to put her into a position where she'll get beat. So yeah, terrible consequences await Sky. Terrible consequences. But in rematch, their first fight between Shernika Johnson and Nina Hughes was weird because they originally announced Hughes as the winner, and then they announced it for Johnson, and so they had this rematch, and she just came in there and beat the snot out of Hughes. You don't see stoppages in women's fights very much, but she beat the snot out of Hughes, and Shernika Johnson retained her title. Any thoughts on this fight, guys, where you got that rare moment of a stoppage in a women's title fight? And the crowd goes mild. All right, let's see here. Justin, what was the fight that you saw in that undercard that you were pretty keen on?
The Katia Palacio fight.
There you go.
That was the fight of the weekend. That was just an absolute. They just beat the crap out of each other. for 10 rounds. And I mean, Palacio is tough as an 80-year-old Brooklyn prostitute. He just is. He took Katiev. There's times where he just stood there just 4 or 5 punches in a row as hard as he could, and Palacio just kept eating them. So if you want to go back and watch a fight from the weekend, out of every fight we had, that was probably the most exciting fight we had, because those guys just went right at each other. Then you had I don't think he's going anywhere, but that Terramona Jr., he's the Australian Olympian.
Terramona.
Yeah, he's a big guy. He fought some guy from Fiji who had like a knee brace. That was, I don't know what you learned from that. But the thing about it is, the guy he was fighting was a short, fat guy with a knee brace, but landed like 3 good bombs. So if they're gonna build up Terramona, and I know they're expecting him to maybe be something down the road, he's probably 20 fights away at least before he's ready to step up versus anybody. But yeah, Palacio versus Katev, that was a good fight. That was a really fun fight. I think Kataev was like 9-0 with 9 knockouts. He's part of the Eye of the Tiger, the Canadian promotion. So
they always rise up to the challenge of the rivals.
Yes, they do. So you're going to see him more. He kind of ran out of gas after like 3 rounds, and then both guys were kind of out of gas, so they just really stood there for most of the fight and just beat each other up. So that was probably that was definitely the best fight on the card. If anybody wants to go back and check that out.
Excellent. Yeah, that one I didn't catch that one. That's extra 2 hours that you guys got on the East Coast really helps watching those Australian and Japanese cards, because it's a bitch for me to do much more than catch the main event on a lot of those, unfortunately. But yeah, that was a busy day of boxing. I didn't watch the Fundora card, so let's do ProBox, and then I'll let you guys close it out with that one. I enjoyed the hell out of this ProBox card, at least the main fights on there. The main event on there was Lester Martinez and Joe James, and what looked like a very interesting fight on paper. And honestly, James is doing very well with his jab early, but the power of Martinez is ridiculous. I mean, he landed a few shots that just decimated Joe James. He landed a right-left combination, I believe in the second round, that sent him down. And then he finished it in either the third or the fourth there. But this Lester Martinez is a big punching 168-pounder. He's undefeated. He's got a win over Carlos Gongora. Everything is a Canelo sweepstakes, but I really think that this guy plays in the 168-pound division, Justin. This was he punches like a freaking mule kicks.
And he's got the rat tail. So that's you always know when a guy has a rat tail. When's the last time you saw one that he couldn't punch?
That's a good point. Costazu had a fantastic rat tail.
Yes, when the guys have the rat tails. Who was the other Argentine with the rat tail?
Matisse
had the rat. I mean, I've never seen, and this is back since every fight I've ever watched. When they've got one, they're gonna bang. And I think Martinez, he's just got that style that every fight he's in is going to be a good fight. He just has that. And James was actually doing pretty well there for a round or two. And then that shot was right on. I don't know how he got up, because he hit him on the temple, and that pretty much put him out. And then the left hand just cleaned him. And so you've got to give James credit, because I don't know how he got up, because his eyes rolled. He was done. I thought that was no way he was going to move. And so to give him credit for actually finishing and come back and trying to finish the fight, because I thought he was completely wiped out. But I always like, that's just my thing, is I always like the guys from the random countries that don't have the backing. He's from Guatemala, not a hotbed of boxing over the years. Is a really, it's not a country that has a lot of people come out of it. And so I always enjoy the guys that, rise up and come from these countries, that impoverished type countries that don't have a lot of fame. They don't have a lot of superstars come out of there. So I hope he does well. He's going to be fun to watch. he's probably going to end up being one of them guys that he'll get knocked out, he'll knock you out kind of type careers, but he's going to be cool to watch for the rest of it.
Yeah, and well, you know what? There's a fair chance this kid has a decent boxing brain too, because he's working with Bomac. They obviously, I think they see something in him. It's an interesting pairing there. But yeah,
that's cool.
But yeah, he's worth checking out. Absolutely. So Lester Martinez, he's not Guatemalan. That's what he's.
Yeah, Guatemalan. Like I said, they don't produce they haven't had a lot of boxing legends over the year come out of Guatemala.
No, and watch him get deported and fuck over all of his plans.
Hey, he can still fight in other countries. I mean, we talked about George Foreman. He fought 5 times. He fought like Venezuela, Zaire. He fought in Japan. He fought like 5 times fights in a row, way outside the U.S. when he was the heavyweight champion. I don't think that's starting to happen now. People are always like, "Oh, why are they fighting in Saudi Arabia? Why are they fighting over here?" That's always been a precedent in boxing. That's something that's happened for years that people like. That's nothing new where people don't fight in their hometown all the time. That was an Andre Ward thing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. We get into that. That's a hell of a conversation. But we wish the best here, and I want to see more from Lester Martinez. May his career continue, and he not get deported and end up in an El Salvadorian prison by accident. The fight before this one, and Justin, I'm really going to have to check out that fight from Australia, because if you say that there was a fight that was better than Vladimir Hernandez and Isaias Lucero, that had to be a hell of a war, because Hernandez was able to get off the deck from I think his first round. He got dropped and he was eating it up, and he came on in the middle and late half the fight, got a split decision over Lucero. But Hernandez is, I don't know. He's an interesting guy. He's like that clear, like gatekeeper kind of level. There's a lot of like Jesus Soto Karass about him, but man, this was a freaking war. I enjoyed the hell out of this fight.
He's always in fights like this, but no, I know how good this one was, but really the Palacio fight was, I'm not saying it was way above, but it was a better fight. But Hernandez, I think he's always been like that. I think the announcers were talking about it, Paulie and them. He likes to get beat up for the first 4 or 5 rounds before he actually starts getting his rhythm, because he likes the other guy to kind of gas out a little bit.
He's like if Homer Simpson actually had skills and it just wasn't, pure tiring them out.
Vladimir likes you to kind of shoot your load a little bit, kind of show him what you got, wear down a little bit, and then he's going to crank it up, because now we all know this style has a shelf life. He's going to smack a brick wall one day. But
when he's at 35 already, it's like you're wondering
why. Yeah, because I mean the condition you have to be in to fight this way is that's what I would like to see is, let's not go behind the scenes of the Mayweather 24/7. I want to see like the Vladimir Hernandez 24/7 and see what some of these guys with these tanks, what they actually do to train. The guys that have could go 15, 20 rounds, can throw 200. I mean, I like to see what their training regimen. I don't really care what the superstar fighters do, because we know what, all the advanced technology they have. I want to see how Vladimir Hernandez in some small little gym is being able to get in the kind of shape he's in to do what he does. Those are the kind of training camps that I would always like to see, is because the man he could go as long as you want to go. He was cut. If that fight would have been 8 more rounds, he would have kept going. Because Lucero was not equipped for that kind of fight. You could tell he was like, oh, this is not where he wanted to be. But you got to give him credit, because man, he hung in too. He kept going.
Well, take this with a grain of salt, but the punch stats on this fight was Hernandez was 208 of 760, and Lucero was 190 of 675. So these guys, respectively, they're basically combining to throw about 135 punches around. in this 10-round fight. It was a good all-action fight. So like I said, I'm going to have to watch that Australian one, because this one, if I was going off of the things that I had seen this week and was heavily invested in, I would have to say that this one was the banger of the week for me, because this was a fantastic war. So yeah, we'll go and check out that other one for sure, and see what was going on there. But yeah, so for those who didn't see it, definitely check out the ProBox card for those two fights. But you'll also get a chance. There's a few stoppages on there, so it kind of went pretty quick. And that's something I also like about ProBox, because they don't have these huge commercial commitments to fulfill. And yeah, I don't think anybody's making a lot of money over there. So we'll see how long it can go. But they just get people in the ring after that. You don't have to wait 35, 40 fucking minutes between fights if there was an early stoppage. It just kind of just keeps going. And if the fight's going to go 4 hours, they go 4 hours. If they go 2.5 hours, they go 2.5 hours. So we saw Jesse Magdaleno back with a third round stoppage over Luis Correa. Both guys were hurt at times in the fight. Magdaleno was able to get a couple knockdowns there. And then the Correa's corner pulled the plug on it, as Magdaleno was honestly just kind of beating the snot out of him. This is the best that I've seen Magdaleno look in God knows how long. Justin, definitely a nice return from him. One of those guys that ProBox is definitely getting their it's the meat and potatoes of their model. So yeah, looking forward to seeing what Magdaleno does next, because he obviously still has something. He looked quick. His punches were accurate, and we don't know what his tank looks like because he was done in 3 rounds.
Who's his trainer now?
I don't know.
I don't know either. I didn't see who it was, but Magdaleno is good because that's what, like you said, this is what ProBox does. They take a guy who was a champion or had a couple of losses, and they kind of bring you back. And so Magdaleno has definitely earned, I don't see he'll get a title shot, but we're going to see him and at least versus another maybe title eliminator type fight maybe. And so I don't know how far Magdaleno goes, but he's always good value. He's always, he's a decent fighter. So he's earned himself. And this, like you said, they don't make much money. A guy like Magdaleno, this really wasn't about a paycheck. This was more about he needed to win to kind of get to that paycheck.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you got to think they'll probably have a nice fight lined up for him potentially in some sort of fight. They'll end up probably being an eliminator, if not for a title. It'll be a chance at another card or a big name on a big card. They ProBox seems to be fine with that. They don't try to keep these guys under contract, keep them for all their fights. If somebody else wants to pick them up and bring them in after a W, they let it go. I like this model a lot. And again, I don't know how long it can go for. There seems to be an interesting feud developing between Turki Al-Sheikh and Gary Jonas, and we'll see how that all turns out. But again, this is a good card. And there was a women's fight in this one too, and the fans hated the decision in the favor of Jasmine Artiga, who won a majority decision, obviously an even card, 98-92, which made no sense, and 96-94. Most everyone thought Regina Chavez won. She threw more punches, more combinations. Artiga relying on single shots that arguably probably were the harder shots, but not nearly as numerous as Chavez. I thought Chavez won to the dismay of Nonito Donaire. Obviously thought his charge won and was happy with her title victory. But this, every card seems to have a shit decision. But the great thing about ProBox is they at least complain about all of it, and they're bitching quite loudly when it came to the cards on this one. So yeah, it was what it was at the end of the day. Maybe we'll see a rematch, but there were robberies all over the place. It seemed. So Beep Bop Boop throwing in 199 says Foreman's best win for me was Lyle Balls of Steel. Yeah, it's one of the greatest fucking fights of all time. I mean, as far as history matters, the best win of his career has got to be Joe Frazier, or Michael Moore. Those two, I think, would be the signatures. But as far as the most entertaining fight, all out, yeah, that was against Ron Lyle, 100%. But let's see here. Also, I did not watch this card yesterday. Anyhow, Sebastian Fundora was able to get a 4th-round stoppage over Cordell Booker. Booker had already lost to Amma Williams, reasonably predictable. I didn't take the effort to tune into this one, Des, because I'm not impressed with these fucking PBC on Amazon cards, and this is another one that was just a big yawn for me when I saw it laid out on the schedule.
Yeah. Ironically, going back to George Foreman, the world stopped in '73 when he beat Joe Frazier, and the world also stopped in '94 when he beat Michael Moorer. So, yeah, that was the pull of George Foreman. Just picking up on what Beatbot Boob said there. The Fundora and Booker one, I think this is the promoter saying to Fundora, have an easy one, because it looked like a glorified sparring session. Booker looked a little bit out of his depth, and he didn't quite understand that when you're going against a 6'6" light middle, you probably don't want to give him range. And that's what Booker did from the very first bell. Fundora took center ring. Booker allowed him to keep the range. And it was Fundora getting straight on the jab and controlling the pace and controlling the range and controlling everything about the fight. Every time Booker found himself in the pocket, he did the best what he could to get out of the pocket and get back on the jab and get at the end of Fundora's long left jab. And he allowed Fundora to dictate the pace with his jab. So I think he got his tactics incredibly wrong last night, Booker. It was routine. It was a 4th-round stoppage. Fundora can fight on the inside, but you've got to take his jab away. And Booker didn't know how to do that. He had no idea. I think this was just an easy one for Fundora. He's a world champion at light middle. There's fights out there for him. And I think it was a tick over. So very routine, glorified sparring session. And Fundora moves on.
Yeah. It wouldn't have been a bad opponent if this was like 4 months after the Zoo fight. My problem with this fight at the end of the day, Justin, is the fact that it took him a year to get him back in the ring again, and this is the best they could fucking do.
Yeah, I mean, I hate to say this, but Booker didn't deserve this. Booker should not have been in there. What had he done? Booker had done anything to deserve to fight for 2 world titles. People forget he was fighting for he would have won 2 world titles last night.
Right. Yeah, that's right. Fundora's unified.
So what if Fundora had like twisted his ankle or something crazy, and then Booker? I mean, I like what Fundora did though. Is he did what he had to do. He didn't play with Booker. He could have easily let Booker kind of walk away, and he did what he had to do. Like Des said, Booker is a limited guy. Doesn't do anything well. And so I'm glad we didn't have to watch 10 or 12 rounds of that. He did what he was supposed to do. You move on. I think they're talking about that. I think Ramos wants that fight, which would be a really good fight. Him versus Ramos would be a good fight if they made that. So, I mean, Fundora has options, but I guess they thought, like you said, they wanted to give an easy one, but they had to wait a long time for Booker. They could have got somebody better, but they just wanted Fundora to have an easy touch, which happens. But I still think you shouldn't be getting easy touches. You shouldn't get easy touches if you have 2 belts. If you're a unified champion, you don't get easy touches then. You've got both. To me, that's like the fight shouldn't have happened. I mean, I'm not trying to knock anybody, but Booker shouldn't have been in there. Who had Booker beaten to really deserve that?
No one.
That's how boxing works when you've got so many titles, and you always going to have a guy that you like Skull. That Skull coming up. There's so many guys like, how in the world did they weasel?
At least Skull beat Vladimir Shishkin, who was highly rated, right? At least he had that W.
So there's stuff for Fundora, but we'll just move on to the next one. Fundora. But the thing about Fundora is we don't need another long wait. He needs to be back in there in a few months because his nose got bloodied, but he didn't take any punishment. We don't need a 7-8 month layoff. He needs to be in there soon. Get him back in there because, like you said, he just got a few rounds to get the rust off after a year layoff. So he needs to be back in there right away. Go ahead and get that fight rolling.
Yeah, absolutely. Shit or get off the pot as far as it goes with Fundora. Was there something else you wanted on that say on that fight, Des?
No, Justin picked up on it. He's absolutely spot on what he said.
Okay. Ames, do you have any thoughts on Fundora before I move on to the next fight on the card? It seemed just pretty pedestrian, all in all, even though I didn't watch it.
Man, he's such an exciting fighter. I think I
Yeah.
find him so fun and entertaining to watch. I'm kind of thinking like take Terence Crawford out the equation here because at super welterweight, I don't think he has another fight at super welterweight. He's going to go fight Canelo, unless this Canelo fight falls through. But he's going to go fight Canelo at super middle. He's not going to come back down to super welterweight. He'll drop down to maybe middleweight or stay at super middle or maybe even retire, whatever the case might be. So if you take him out of the equation, are we calling Fundora and Ortiz the two best in the division?
I think Murtazaliev would have something to say about that assumption.
Okay, and would you?
And I think with that left hook, if I was Fundora, I'd be scared to shit of Murtazaliev.
I feel like I don't think there's a really one who stands head and shoulders above the other, apart from physically Fundora over the other two. But I don't think any of them really. I think each three of them could beat each other on any given night. I think there's an opportunity there for any of the three to really kind of capture the division, and you wouldn't mind seeing it being Fundora because the way that he fights, like him and Ortiz, it's just an unreal fight. It's just whether those fights can be made and do get made, and then if the idea of Fundora go to middleweight, and then who's the one there at middleweight? You've got like Lara and Janibek. Yeah, that's what I'm saying. You got Janibek and Lara and things, but I can see Fundora having the beating of Janibek as well, who's struggled at middleweight to make the weight. He might be out of the division. Who knows? So I think there's a real opportunity for Fundora to really make a push, make a surge to take a hold of the division and above. But like has been mentioned before, he's really kind of got to get active and get to it because those windows, those doors close so quickly. But I think he's got a real opportunity.
Yeah, it's those divisions are kind of wide open in their own way. I think if there was any fight that I would like to see based on pure violence perspective, it would be Murtazaliev and Bahuchik. Mm-hmm. But that's just my own disgusting wants and desires at the end of the day, because that would just be pure violence. But yeah, I think there's 3 or 4 guys who all play in that division pretty well, and yeah, it'd be nice to see them all fight. But Fundora being with PBC kind of throws a wrench in the gears on a lot of that, I think, in the way they can come out. But I don't know. We'll see is on that as far as that one goes. I do think the guys are correct in believing that Jesus Ramos is probably the next guy in line especially after that win over Guido Emmanuel Schramm. Schramm, not a great fighter, but he's a decent enough fighter. I've seen him a handful of times. His grandparents met on a boat leaving Europe in 1946. No, that's just a joke. But I don't know. Ramos seems like he's probably is probably next in line for Fundora, and I don't know. Does he have what it takes to potentially upset the 154 apple cart, Des?
I think Fundora is a hard night's work for anybody. I think he showed that with Tszyu. I think Murtazaliev is the one I'm keeping my eye on at 54. I think he's the one that's just coming through now, and I think he's got the motor skills, the pedigree. I think he comes from the right region. I think if Bud moves on, which he looks like he's not going to come back down to 54. So I think it's somewhere between Ortiz, Fundora, and Murtazaliev. I'm agreeing with Ames. I think Fundora is always in fun fights, but I also agree with Justin. We've got to get him going. This is a kid that boxes once a year. And that's probably why the Booker fight was made, because he hasn't boxed in a year. Let's give him Cordell Booker. It was very routine. It was glorified sparring. Okay, well, let's get him out again in the next 3 months. Let's not wait another year, because that's the form. It's one fight a year. But now he holds 2 versions of a world title. He might be the lineal champion if Bud moves on. So let's see what he's made of. So I'm not saying he's got to jump in with an Ortiz or a Martezelliev straight away, but there's Buachuk, Keith Thurman's back in the groove. Israel Madrimov is coming off the loss. There's fights to be made at this division. It can be a very exciting division. And it's a division that isn't always exciting. So I think Fundora adds something. I'm with Ames. I like watching him. I think he's unique. I think you'll put bums on seats and eyes on the sport if Fundora's boxing for world titles. But he's got to be active. He's been far too inactive and it stagnated him. So the next 6 months will tell us a lot of the people behind him, what they want to do with him and how much ambition and how much intent he's got. So the next 6 months, we have the conversation again. We'll be able to look back and say, has he got going? Has he taken the baton on? And has he fought the names I just said? But until that time, we just won't know, mate.
Yeah, I got to tell you, I have a lot of respect for that family as far as it goes. They have no problems taking on difficult challenges. They stay in the gym. They keep at it. Fundora didn't hesitate at taking that short notice shot against Tim Tszyu, made the most of it. So yeah, and to be fair to him and PBC to a degree, they wasted a lot of time trying to make the fight with Errol Spence just for it to fall through, and it seems by all accounts that it fell through based on Errol Spence and his side of the argument. So, but yeah. Anyhow, let's see here. Justin, do you have any thoughts on Jesus Ramos and his performance last night? Getting Schramm out of there was decent, but Vladimir Hernandez did the same thing.
Ramos did what he's supposed to do. He's earned himself a title shot at. I think he's going to get Murtazaliev or Fundora. I think he'll get one of them maybe, but Ramos, like I said, Ramos should be undefeated because he beat Lubin, and Ramos is decent. There's nothing. I don't see where he could. With Fundora, you don't know because Fundora, how he is. He could easily get knocked out just because he's so large, and Ramos does have a little punch to him. So I would actually rather see Ramos versus Murtazaliev. I just think that would be a good fight too. And honestly, if you put Murtazaliev versus anybody, it's going to be a good fight. But Ramos did what he was supposed to do.
I don't think I remember anyone hurting Ramos in his career either.
He's got some good skill. He doesn't do anything incredibly well or perfect, but he's got good ability. He's got a decent punch. He's got pretty decent boxing IQ. So he'll give everybody a good fight. And I don't think if he beat Fundora, nobody on here would be shocked. That's what I'm trying to say. None of us would be like, oh, I can't believe that happened. I don't think anybody would be shocked if he beat Fundora.
No, I bet you he'd be the underdog in that fight. Not massive, but I bet you he'd probably be in like the 5-2, 3-1.
Oh, yeah. But like I said, we wouldn't be surprised if he beat Fundora because Fundora's a good fighter, but he also, has his flaws. He likes to mix it up maybe too much, and then he likes to. So Ramos has a chance. So we'll see. Like I said, that is probably going to happen next because they're both PBC, and that's the easiest fight to make. So I would about guarantee that's probably where they're going to go. That just makes sense because PBC they like to do their own little insulated thing. Well, he was the co-main event. It all sets up. He's going to fight Ramos next. I would be really surprised if that doesn't happen. Well, surprised.
They got Ramos out real quick again because wasn't he on the Benavidez card?
He fought February the 1st.
Yeah.
So they got him out for a reason, and he'll
turn around in PBC history.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I think Ramos is also because I think the fight he had in the Benavidez card was pretty easy. So I always say that if you have an easy fight, then why would you wait around 6 or 7 months? If you take care of business, get him back out there. And that's what – so I definitely believe PBC setting that up. That's one reason why he was rushed back, and they brought him back so quickly.
Yeah, and and I have no problems with that fight. I just want it to happen sooner than, I don't know, next year. So fingers crossed as far as that goes. But yeah, it's no problem with that fight whatsoever. I would have rather seen that than Sebastian Fundora against Cordell Booker. Now, Des, apparently on that card, again, didn't see it, there was a terrible robbery. Why don't you take us through it, and if you agree with the people and their sentiments?
Yeah, this is the Elijah Garcia and Terrell Goucher fight. And
Yeah.
I don't quite know what to make of either guy, to be honest. Garcia looked to be, he didn't have much pop, although he's coming in with 16 with 13 knockouts. But he didn't have much snap. He didn't have much pop behind his punches. He didn't have a lot of head movement. And you know, am I right in remembering is Terrell a former Olympian? Do you recall that, guys?
This is correct.
Yeah. So Terrell's got really good motor skills, and from the very word go, Terrell was comfortable in there, and he was comfortable with the range, and he was comfortable with the way Garcia was squaring up. One of the best knockdowns you're ever going to see, technically, the most technically delivered punch, 1-2, a snap left hand, right hand, was Goucher's first round knockout of Garcia. He didn't just throw the shot, he leant into it. So he turned the jab, but he snapped back with a right hand and he went right through his gloves. And it was almost like the jab was knocking on the door and the right hand was going through it. And he dropped Garcia. And I thought, this is where Goucher comes into his own. This is where Goucher now shows us how good he is. Because up until this point, you look on the guys that Goucher's fought and lost to. He's a bit of a gatekeeper. He's a world-class gatekeeper. And I thought last night he's going to really exhibit and demonstrate what a good fighter he is. And I actually felt that Garcia probably won maybe 3 rounds, and I'm being lucky. I'm being, generous doing that. I'm trying to balance this one out. But I just thought Goucher was comfortable with the distance. He was comfortable with the pace. He threw a brilliant backhand right. Garcia was easy to hit. Goucher boxes like a veteran. He draws you in. He sits on the ropes and he tucks his elbows in. And when you're there, he throws combination punches. And then he's gangly. And he's one of them guys. He's not a puncher, but you seem to draw a lot out of you when he lands. I thought it was a really good performance from Goucher. And maybe Goucher is one of them guys, and boxing's full of them. They never get the rub. And they've always got to beat the guy twice as much to get a decision. And they're always told, take this fight, and when you win it, we'll make you the A side. But sadly, he never gets there. And I've become a bit of a fan of Terrell Goucher because I enjoy what he does. I think he fights like a veteran. He's got a lot of tricks up his sleeve. He's learned how to box without being a big puncher. He's got good technique. He delivers a really good right hand. Last night, I thought was a really bad decision, if I'm honest. Look, it wasn't the worst I've ever seen, but watching that fight, scoring it in my head, when the final bell come, Garcia looked like he'd been beaten, and Goucher looked like, yeah, that was easy work. And when the decision was announced, you looked at Goucher's face and you thought, yeah, I know how you feel. It's happened to you again, and you're not being given the rub. And it's really sad because Goucher had done nothing wrong last night, and boxing's let itself down a little bit, if I'm honest. Anyone watching that fight, and I'd love to know what Ames thinks, or Justin or yourself, anyone watching that fight, I know you didn't watch it, sorry, Justin or Ames, if they did watch it, I know guys in the chat will have seen it, I know guys in our WhatsApp group see it, but anyone watching that fight surely can't have had Garcia winning it. It wasn't even close. So it almost looks like, for whatever reason, whether Garcia is a promoted kid, his face fits, whether he sells a ticket, I don't know. But Goucher's face didn't fit last night, and he's been given a really bad end of a decision.
Yeah. I mean, feel free to discuss how bad you thought the decision was. Either of you guys. Like I said, I haven't seen it, but yeah, get your licks in.
I'll let Ames go if he saw the fight.
I see you on. You're not on mute, but I can't hear you, Ames. Ames.
I'll go. I guess I'll jump
Okay,
in.
go ahead.
I was gonna let him go first, but I agree with what Des said. I will say though, I don't agree with the decision. I think Gaucher won 7-3. I mean, you could even had it 8-2 if you wanted to. But Garcia did have the style last night that could. Now, I don't call corruption, but he does have the style, the way he fought last night, and some of his activity, because he was kind of the guy going forward. I could see how he could trick a judge into thinking that he was doing more and he was landing more and he was winning the rounds. I can see how I can see how he tricked him. But Gaucher was in full control the whole time. Garcia has no defense. That right hand, because they said that it was so funny. They kept saying that Garcia went to Bob Santos because he's like the southpaw whisperer, and that every southpaw goes to him. Well, he sure as hell didn't do a damn good job last night, because he got hit. Garcia got hit with the southpaw shot. The right hand over the top is the shot that you go for a southpaw, and Gaucher landed that like 9 times in a row. So whatever Santos was doing as the whisperer, he did a horrible job, because Gaucher, whenever he wanted to land that shot, landed it. He just set it up with the jab, boom, every time. Garcia had no answer for it. Garcia even started trying to like just square him up and trying to get out of his southpaw stance to try to stop the right hand from hitting him in the face. And I think if
What's that? Are you still there, Justin? You kind of cut off abruptly there. I don't know if you hit a button or something.
you hear me?
Yeah, there you are.
Okay. Abner Mares summed it up last night. He said him and Garcia are like best friends, and he's known the family his whole life, and he said they didn't deserve shit. And he's going to tell them that. He's like, you didn't deserve that. And he said he's going to tell them that they should never have won that fight. And I'm like, the guy, Abner Mares said best friend. Like he said, I am really good friends. He said, he said, but that was a joke. And I'm like, that right there summed up that fight better than anybody could have better than we can sum it up. When the man like Abner Mares, who knows probably more about boxing than he knows more than we do, he's been in there. He's really good friends with the family. And he says they didn't win shit, and that's a joke. Then there you go. That's all you got to say about that fight.
It was a bad one, Matty. It really was bad. It was every round. Gaucher was in control. He understood the distance. Garcia didn't know how to get his head out of the way. Garcia was squaring up and getting caught with that. Brilliant. It made Gaucher's backhand look amazing. He had a snap to it. He was knocking his head back. Then Gaucher would sometimes sit on the ropes and invite Garcia in. And then he would win that exchange and then step off and start again. Garcia was chasing that fight every round, one after the other. And Gaucher was so in control. He was so comfortable. It's hard to fathom at the final bell, Gaucher couldn't get this fight. It was a real bad one like that. It was, my eyes don't lie to me. Justin just confirmed it. It was, at very best, a 7-3 fight.
The best.
There'd be a lot of people that say, I didn't give Garcia 3 rounds. And it was a real shot in the arm. It was a real kick in the knackers for boxing again. But it's a shame because Gaucher's the guy you can job because no one's talking about it.
Did you see the way Gaucher I'm sorry to interrupt you, but did you see the way Gaucher at the end of it? He kind of had that defeated boxer. At the end of it,
he looked exasperated. He looked gutted.
He expected it. He wasn't even really he didn't get mad. He was like, "Yep, that's about right."
It was heartbreaking. He said, I'm the guy they do that to.
Yeah, he knew it.
Yeah,
but like I said, Garcia. I'm just saying Garcia coming forward, and Garcia, if we have to say something, he did some really good body work. He did some good things in there, but that's not how you win rounds. I think it was Mares or somebody said, but Garcia, he said, you got to look behind that and look at who's really controlling what they want to do and who's landing the shots that matter. And that's what Gaucher did. But Gaucher, if I'm him, I mean, I don't. He's earned himself another payday versus another prospect if he wants it. But I kind of hope that Gaucher's like, you know what? F this. I'm not gonna get another world title shot. I'm not gonna. How bad does he really want to come back and make 20 grand to fight another prospect and get? Because he's not going. We've already seen that right there showed last night. Gaucher is PBC. That's where he's going to box. That's who's going to bring him back. They screwed him. They're not going to let him beat one of their. And Garcia, I think I said it last night when we were talking. He is going to be a guy that we're going to see in the next fight or two laid out cold.
Yes, we will. Yeah,
because Gaucher he's got a nice little thudding shot, but he doesn't have like that power.
He's not a puncher. No, he's not a puncher.
And so Garcia leads with his face, has no defense at all. I mean, he is going to get really hurt. And you know what? They were talking about last night that Garcia, his family is like wanting him to retire, basically. Like, hey, this is it. You've got to show us something, or we're going to like not back you in your career anymore. So, like I said, he's already got 1 foot out already, and it was a shame. I mean, it wasn't the biggest upset I've ever seen in my life, but you feel bad for a guy like Gaucher who, he wasn't getting paid that much. You could tell he come in great shape. He had a great game plan, and then he just got fucked.
But you know what happens now? Because of that performance, Gaucher don't get 10 weeks notice anymore. He gets 6 weeks notice. They're not going to give him any time. Yeah, they're not going to give him time now because they realise he could catch you out because you've got good motor skills. So Gaucher ends up getting 6 weeks notice or 5 weeks notice, and he takes it, and it might be the wrong weight, or he might have to cut weight drastically. So guys like Gaucher never get redemption. It just gets harder for them, and they end up having this record of 20 wins and 18 losses, and no one knows the true story behind it.
Yeah, it's they're always going to end up taking a 22-year-old prospect over a 38-year-old gatekeeper. That's the ridiculous thing about boxing, when maybe the message should be for the young man to go and get better. But yeah, anyways, that was the card from God, where the heck was that from Vegas last night. Now this week coming up here, we got a few interesting fights going on here. We've got we're gonna have a fight also from Vegas. They're gonna be headlined by Mikaela Mayer and Sandy Ryan's rematch, and also Brian Norman Jr. defending his title over with Derek Cuevas. Bruce Carrington is also in the ring there. Gonna see one of the Vargas boys, the one with most upside, probably Emiliano, and also let's see here. Looks like Troy Isley is going to be in there in a 10-rounder as well. Also going to have Tiger Johnson. Let's take a look what's going on here. That's a fairly interesting, a few interesting fights on there. I'm obviously looking forward to the main event as a big Mayer fan, and I enjoyed the heck out of their first fight. But this fight, Brian Norman Jr. against Derek Cuevas. Cuevas, I'm trying to think where I have seen him before. He is 27-1-1 currently. As he lost a split decision against a 23-8 guy. It's interesting. The names on his resume are names from years gone by, unfortunately. He has wins over Alberto Mosquera, which was only about 18 months ago, Albert Mensah, Bradis Prescott, and I don't know how this guy ended up in a big title fight like this.
Bradis Prescott, God, was that recent?
No, he beat him in 2018, so that was 7 years ago.
I was going to say, that's when Bradis Prescott's another one of those guys that went on the "I used to be somebody" tour, and just everybody was just knocking him out. Because he's on the I'm going to use his name tour, just like Livingston Bramble was. Like, well, people know him, so we'll throw him out there.
Yeah, this is a pretty sad title defense here, to be honest with you. Very disappointed in what they're putting up here for us. I think Carrington and Vivas is still on. I think that could be the most interesting fight on the card. Vivas is a pretty sturdy operator, and he's given a lot of guys a rough go, sometimes even in defeat. Yeah. Honestly, Des, I got to tell you, the most interesting fight on this card really is the women's fight between Sandy
Yeah, I think you're
Ryan and
right.
Mikaela Mayer. And
Yeah, I think you're right.
Argentinians-
Vivas lost 2 of his last 4. He's not a puncher. It's pretty safe play for Bruce Carrington. And Derek Chivas is really safe play for Brian Norman. I don't know how he got that shot. So you might be right. This might be all about the main event, Mayer and Sandy Ryan. Matty, you on mute, mate?
Oh, yep, I was. So do you think? How are you feeling? Do you think Ryan's going to be able to exact revenge? I believe you caught the first fight.
Yeah, first fight. No, Mikaela Mayer's too good for Sandy Ryan. It's too good. And I don't know if you noticed, is Sandy Ryan with the same corner team, or has she got a different corner team?
I don't think she's made any changes. Ames, have you heard anything on that regard?
I think she's with the same team.
I didn't like that team. I didn't like the language in the corner. I didn't like the way they was trying to motivate her. I think sometimes when you're a Sandy Ryan away from home against a talent like Mikaela Mayer, she's a talent. I think you need the right chemistry in the corner. I didn't think it was the right chemistry. I think Mikaela Mayer wins this time even more convincingly.
Well, and if I recall, Ames, isn't what happened is that basically as Ryan stole Mayer's corner from underneath her? Do I remember that correctly?
Yeah, something along those lines. Yeah, that was what the word was. And apparently the thought process was that the paint attack was some sort of vengeance or unproved get back for that in the first instance.
I've got to say, I don't know any of that backstory. I remember in the fight, the language that Sandy Ryan's trainer was using, his type of vernacular, his way of motivating her. I don't think it worked. I think he was putting pressure on her. I don't think she responded well. I remember saying it at the time on the pod. That wasn't the right type of language that a trainer should be using with a kid like Sandy Ryan. And I think it played into Mikaela Mayer's hands. I think Sandy boxed. She was nervous. She was tense. And I think she needed to relax a little bit. I think Mikaela Mayer was the better fighter. And I think in them instances, you need good chemistry in the corner because the details really count. They get you over the line. And I think they failed at it last time. So just on what I saw last time, I thought Mayer was the better kid. But I think if it's the same Sandy Ryan with the same trainer, no, I can't see how they're going to have enough to get past Mikaela Mayer.
Yeah, well, if you like that play, you're going to get better than even money if you put Mayer together with Brian Norman Jr. Mayer and Ryan is a pick'em fight right now with the books.
I'll chuck in Bruce Carrington as well. I'll do a treble.
Yeah, I don't know if there's even if there's enough room on Bruce Carrington to take the risk because you're one accidental headbutt away. What does it add to your bet? So yeah, it's honestly this main event's good. Mayer did very well in the first fight. I think the key is in her defeats that were very, very close, and a lot of people think that there's a small argument that she's even an undefeated fighter still at this point in her career. That's just to the whim of the judges that she's not. But I think Mayer has learned the right times to throw punches, the right times to be active, what looks flashy, what does the work in a sport where they're not producing a lot of knockouts. So just kind of unlocked that key, I think, potentially of how to win the judges over.
And she's a good talent. She's a talent, in the world of women's boxing. I mean, you could argue that she could have, on another night, she'd have got the Baumgarten decision. On another night, she'd have got the Jonas decision. So she's probably sitting there at 22-0 on another day. So I think she's a real talent, Mikaela Mayer, in the world of women's boxing.
To me, she's definitely a top 10 pound for pound women's fighter. Again, if not for the rub of the cards, very well an undefeated fighter, champion in 2 weight divisions. 17
That's a good
pounds
question,
apart
Matty.
too.
Go on. You're a women's boxing expert, okay? So give me your quick pound for pound 5.
The pound for pound top 5. I think you would
Women's
have
stuff.
you'd have to go with Clarissa Shields, Amanda
Mm.
Serrano, Katie Taylor. God, I'll tell you what, the problem is Sinisa Estrada retiring probably throws a wrench in those gears. So I think I might go with Jessica Neri Plata, who has a couple of belts at 108, and the German gal at 118 pounds. No, not
Okay,
German.
brilliant.
She's Denmark. Dina Thorsberg. She's
Danish.
been
Okay.
undefeated for some years. I
Okay,
think
brilliant.
Thorsland, that's her last name, I think. So yeah, that would probably be my 5 off. Getting out of that, it gets a little bit more difficult at that point in time because there's just so much talent it's stacked in a few divisions, honestly. Lauren Price, she might honestly already be in there just because sometimes you got to when there's a limited stack of talent, you got to go with the eye test, and she passes the eye test, right?
You'd put Chantal Cameron above Lauren Price, wouldn't you?
Chantal Cameron, yes, and especially when you consider that probably you thinking she might have gotten a bad deal on the cards against Katie too. I mean, if you look at it that way, Chantal's probably top 5.
But they're your top 3, aren't they? You'd say Shields, Serrano, and Taylor. Are they your top 3?
Solid.
Inarguably.
Yeah, that's it. Brilliant. Yeah, perfect. Yeah.
Good answer, and it goes to show. I mean, if you look at the arguments between Taylor's fans and Serrano fans, the judges' cards, I mean, they're honestly only separated by a small handful of points. It's just, and it's we'll see what happens this third time around. Anyhow, but yes, we got that card coming up. But I think the big fight that we're all kind of looking forward to see if there's anything different that is going to happen is the rematch between William Zepeda and Tevin Farmer, which is going to be happening this Saturday evening as well. So it's going to be one of those things where you got to pick which card you're going to watch live, which one you're going to watch on replay. But this is a very interesting rematch. Let me get up get the undercard up here and see anything that's on there. Ooh, there's one for you. My boy Oscar Cayasso is on there against Edwin Cano Hernandez. Again, I think personally that Oscar Cayasso is going to be the next big thing in the lower weight classes. And he's just kicking off at 105. Hell of a freaking fighter. A big fan of Collazo. Ooh, a nice women's fight on there. Yokasta Valle taking on Marlon Esparza. There would be another one I would put in my top 10, Des, would be Valle. I saw her in the fight against Sinisa Estrada, which many people thought that she won. She's got Gloria Alvarado in her corner, who is a fantastic trainer. Esparza just recently had a loss on her ledger there. Who was that against? I'm trying to remember. She just got another W. It's Gabrielle Celestilanes, who went on and she lost to Fundora. That's who. She lost to Gabriela Fundora. That's right. That's how that all went down. So there's another top 10. Gabriela Fundora. I would say that she's knocking on top 5 too. The chick can punch. Wandering away crazy with the ADD on this card. Gregory Morales, 17-1, taking on Jonathan Rojas Sardenas, 11-4-1. I seem to think that guy can fight better than his record. Joselito Velasquez taking on Adolfo Castillo Gonzalez, 21-1 against 12-4-2. Oh, and Robin Sirwan Safar is on there as well. As you guys might have forgotten the name, he's the cat who beat Kovalev at cruiserweight and looked pretty sharp in doing it. So he's on there against the 13-3 Roberto Silva. But I think this is potentially his first fight with Golden Boy. That's the undercard. Justin, what stands out to you? I like, as I said before, I am actually kind of happy with this undercard. I think the chance to Valle Esparza competitive fight, but I don't know if you've gotten into him yet. I'm excited to see Oscar Collazo do his work. The guy's aces.
Oh yeah, I've watched. I think his last like 6 or 7 fights. He's fun to watch.
That
So
right hook is beautiful, beautiful.
Thing about it is though, you like about Collazo is because he's only like the one. I mean, he's the low weight, but he can bang. Yeah, he's got a good punch. So he's always fun to watch. And Tevin Farmer, I never thought we would have the rematch with Tevin Farmer. That he would have done well enough to earn a rematch, but I still think
Zepeda in the first fight coming very close.
Yeah.
Cards.
So it's going to be. I still think Farmer loses this one, but the top. You know me. I think I've heard Valle's name before. I'll watch the main event and the co-main event. They're both pretty interesting. So it's pretty I mean, there's 2 good cards. I mean, nothing spectacular, but they're good cards for us. The guys that, the people that really like boxing, these are our kind of cards. The guys that I don't know how many people are watching the minimum weight class that much, but you're missing out because Collazo is fun to watch. And then for Farmer, that should be a decent fight. We'll see. Because I think it's for the vacant something, isn't it? WBC, WBA. It's for one of them, isn't it?
Put him in line at 135 for something
Yeah.
or other in a fight a year and a half to make. And
yeah, it's some interim vacant something. So, hey, good on Farmer. Because you got to think about it. What was it? Couple years ago, we thought Farmer his career was over.
We wrote him off after the 3rd time they had to cancel the Mickey Bay fight.
Yeah, I mean, like the 4th different country the Mickey Bay fight was supposed to be in, and then Farmer just kept you didn't know what was going to happen. So good on him.
He's looked
good on him.
You got to remember that he lost to Zepeda on the cards the first time. He lost to Raymond Murataya in his fight. So he's been getting these chances off the back of defeats. He's a quality operator.
He's slick. Farmer's slick. He has a good boxing. He has a good boxing IQ. He knows what he's doing in there. He just does it. He's one of those guys that's like he's missing a couple of parts.
If he had one good punch,
it
would be a different story with
him.
He
does because he's fast.
Punch.
He's fast. He knows how to do everything you're supposed to be able to do. Like you said, he doesn't have that one equalizer, that one thing that puts him above everybody, and that's kind of what has kept him where he's at. But hey, I don't think anybody thought he was going to be a world champion. He did it. He's still out there doing it. But I think Zepeda, he needs to win this fight because this is, I wouldn't say make or break, but he can't lose this fight or his career is really going nowhere. He has to win.
He needs to make that Shakur Stevenson fight.
Yes.
They're really trying to force that fight to happen.
And for him, after the fight last time, he don't have to have a knockout, but he needs to there can't be no question in the win this time. I really believe he needs to have it where you're like, either he knocks him out or you're like, okay, well, he definitely won. We don't need another rematch. This thing's settled. So I think the pressure is definitely more on him. I mean, it's in Cancun. I mean, pressure is all on him. Farmer, he don't care. He just shows up. So he can just do what he does.
Motherfucker's going to go in there and get a paycheck. He's probably going to spend the next week sitting on a fucking beach getting loaded on drinks with pineapple and coconut. We should all be so fortunate.
So he'd have a tough time in a DUI test because he really couldn't follow the light. I was looking at his picture again, and with his disability, it's amazing that he's made it this far. If you really want to think about it, he has overcome so much to get to where he's at right now. So you got to give it to Farmer.
You wonder if they'd let him in the Special Olympics.
They would ask what event he was in. I mean, I'm just hey, my bro, this is what he does for a living. So I can make these jokes.
Your brother fights cross-eyed people for a living?
He teaches cross-eyed people for a living.
Okay.
Hey, that's another story for another time.
This is very, very exciting times. I don't know. Ames, why don't you give me your thoughts on this card coming from Cancun? Looking forward to this main event. It definitely has connotations in the lightweight division.
No, I mean, I'll just stick with the main event. And you guys are talking about Farmer having all the assets apart from that big punch, but he found a wallop of a shot in the first fight against Zepeda. It really turned the tide of the fight. I mean,
He's
tides
sneaky with
turn.
that left. It'll drop you. It might not finish you, but it'll drop you.
Yeah, no, it was a real good punch, and it was like, I mean, I've been doing a little bit of training myself and just learning kind of the fundamentals and the mechanics of boxing, and he really just kind of caught that piston, shifted over with the slip, and then come back round with it, and it was a real good shot that he found against Zepeda. And Zepeda, I think in these type of fights, and just in general the way he fights, you can't fight like that for 10 whole rounds, otherwise you're asking what are you on. And you know, maybe some people might have
And
this
I'll tell
question
you what,
about Zepeda.
I think the reason, if I had to take a guess with the with knowing the way boxing works, Ames, the reason this is for some interim title is so that it's over 12 rounds. They
Right.
want Zepeda to get those 2 extra rounds, thinking it makes a difference potentially against Farmer.
I think it works the other way. In terms of just the rounds, I think that benefits Farmer more than it does Zepeda. I think the tide turned after that 4th round once Zepeda knew he could, Farmer could hit him and hurt him, and as well, then the gas tank kind of dissipated. I think Farmer's got to essentially play the first 4 or 5 rounds the same way he played it. The first time round, he's got to play it again the second time round, but he's got to find a big punch and he's got to take more risks in the second fight. What works against him this time around is the fact that the first fight was over in Saudi Arabia, and some fighters have been talking about, maybe catching a little bit of an illness, then Dubois to pull out from his fight, maybe not being 100% and acclimatized into the humidity. Like Dubois' team came like a week before the fight. I don't know what Zepeda's team did, but if you haven't acclimatized to those surroundings, those can take a little bit out of your performances, and he might look at that and say, look, I'm fighting now in home ground in Mexico. I've got all my home comforts here. Farmer doesn't. Farmer's still coming over. But I'm in familiar territory, familiar surroundings. I've got everything stacked in my favor here in this fight, so I can really give the full reflection of what I've been doing in the gym. So if there was little bits of that in that fight, then I guess Zepeda will take a lot of confidence with that. But I think Farmer's in with a shout here. Like I said, just take more risks in the fight than you did the first time around after the 4th, 5th round, and then you really kind of close down the stretch and start pushing Zepeda back. Once you start pushing Zepeda back, I don't see him as great as great on the back foot as he is on the front foot. Absolutely not. His whole game is predicated on being on the front foot, and once that's taken away from him, I think the judging of the scoring should be pretty easy, and it'll be a Farmer win. But it's going to take a lot for that to happen, considering as well too that he's over in Mexico as well. So stranger things have happened, but it's going to be tough for Farmer to get the victory on the judges' scorecards, as well as after maybe getting on the eye like he did in the first time round. But I think he can do it. I wonder, just to throw a little bit of a thought into the mix as well. I was talking about kind of learning things in boxing at the fundamental level, and my coach, one of my coaches at the gym, I was doing a couple of sessions with him, and he was just teaching me like the fundamentals as we mentioned. And he goes, you've got to feint with everything. You got to feint with your hands, you feint with your feet, you feint with your body, you got to feint with your eyes as well too, and you got to show in one direction but actually go in the other one. And I wonder if it's a hard read for a fighter up in each other's faces to know where Farmer's going because of his disability. And I mean that honestly, I mean that in a
no, you're right, because you don't know where he's going.
Exactly.
That's how you really go about winning. You turn a perceived disadvantage into an advantage.
No, Ames is right though. Zepeda is a bully. That's kind of his thing. And
he beat the shit out of Hughes. Max, he didn't know what the fuck to do.
And when you stand up to a bully, what happens? Most of the time, they don't know how to react, and that's exactly what Farmer did. He stood up to him, and we saw what happened. Zepeda was like, kind of like, oh shit, he didn't know what to do. So you're right, Farmer. Nobody would be shocked if Farmer won. That's the kind of I always go into fights like this. It's not like Farmer can't beat him, but like I said earlier, if Zepeda loses this one, I have no idea where they go now. I mean, we don't need Farmer Zepeda 3. I don't think that's the fight they're going to be. I don't know. You can't really go back to the drawing board because Zepeda, he kind of is what he is. I don't think he's going to be one of those guys that's going to all of a sudden turn into, like Ames said, a back foot boxer, and he can do all these different things. He just is kind of what he is, a Mexican fighter who comes at you and tries to punish you, and that's his style. And it's going to be interesting. I think Farmer, like I said, he's got nothing to lose. I mean, who cares? He gets knocked out. Whatever happens to Farmer, he's probably just happy to be in this position.
Yeah, I mean, he's getting, a few good paydays off of this without having a W on the ledger during this period of time there. So he's got to be ecstatic at the end of the day. Des, what are your thoughts on this fight in the card? Are you looking forward to the action that we have coming from Cancun? I'm sure at the very least you wish you were there in Cancun to watch it. I mean, shit. If it's Cancun, I think I'd probably be fine with a couple of chimpanzees just flinging poo at each other. And as long as I could drink something out of a coconut, I'm cool.
I'm happy in East London, thanks, Matty. I'm okay here, but I will be watching the
You
card.
like the clouds, huh? You like the clouds.
Yeah, I like the vibe, I'm really big on Oscar Chiazzo. I think he's a fantastic addition to them lower weights, and I think he's going to be talked about like we talk about Cesar Martinez and Bam Rodriguez and Inoue. I think he's one of them guys. I think he's exciting. He comes from a brilliant part of the world in Puerto Rico, based in New Jersey, so they might creep him into New York where he can really sell a ticket and pick up a following. You can maybe put him in the Barclays. I think he's got the potential to go a long way, that kid. He's a puncher in a weight class that doesn't really have punchers, and he's got a swagger about him. I'm really high on the kid, and if anyone in the chat doesn't recall him, go back to his last fight when he fought the Thai kid. He was brilliant, and he really is worth watching, Oscar Collazo. So I'm looking forward to that one. I can't say anything more than what all you guys have said about the Farmer and Zepeda one. I've said for a long time on this chat, there's something about Zepeda that the people behind Zepeda don't trust. They're not 100% on him. And I know he's got this wonderful record. I know he comes from a great part of the world. I know it should all be laid on a plate for him. But they're not putting him with a punch. They've never put Zepeda in with a puncher. And they must know something. And Farmer's not a puncher, but what he is a real slick, well-rounded Philadelphian southpaw. And he gave Zepeda fits last time. I don't know if he wins this one. I don't know how he's going to get round it. I don't know if he's got enough in him to get over the line, particularly against a fighter like this on a Golden Boy card out in Cancun. But this one, win, lose or draw, I think we'll all have a much firmer opinion on Zepeda after this one. We'll know a little bit more about him and how high his ceiling is. But I'll reiterate what I said. There's something about Zepeda that Golden Boy don't fancy, because they're matching him ever so carefully, and he's had a long career, and it's not what they do with these Mexican punchers. They roll the dice with them. It's in their nature, but they're not doing it with him. So there's something I don't fancy.
They're worried about punchers. They're not worried about southpaws. Clearly, he keeps going in with them, but they're worried about punchers.
They've not put him near a puncher, and. Look, I mean, Farmer gave him fits last time round. I thought Farmer might have just nicked it, but no arguments. I'm glad they're having the return, but it probably will all go for Zepeda on this one. On his show, they've got Farmer away from home, but Farmer's a slick Philadelphian southpaw. So it's about whether Farmer can keep Zepeda off balance. If Farmer can keep finding that shot and touching him and not letting him set. If you go back to the Maxie Hughes fight, Zepeda was allowed to set. He got into a rhythm, but Farmer stopped that in their first fight. So he's got to continue that now for the next 12 rounds again. Whether he'll get a decision or not, I don't know. But he's got the formula to beat him. He's got the motor skills. He's got the feet. He understands the angles. He's that slick southpaw. So he's got everything going for him. He's well-travelled. He's well-seasoned. There's nothing in boxing Farmer hasn't seen before. It's going to be an interesting one, but win, lose or draw, I think this time next week we'll all have a firmer opinion on how high the Zepeda ceiling is. I think win, lose or draw, we'll have a better idea of him next week. But I'm absolutely looking forward to the Collazo one. I think Collazo is a fantastic fighter. I think he's exciting. I think he's got it all going for him. He's a ruthless puncher. He's got a great attitude. I'm looking forward to seeing how far he can go and how far Golden Boy can take him.
Yeah, I'll be following his career until it's over, but he's one of those guys that's going to go up a few weight classes and grab a few belts along the way. I think the lineage of the great, sub bantamweight fighters is basically going to go Chocolatito, Bam, Collazo. That's how I kind of see that going. But anyways, that's just one guy's opinion there. Yeah, this is going to be fun, and hopefully, I'm thinking a lot of this fight really depends on Zepeda's ability to find a home for the right hook, and quit being so left hand happy. Because if he can find a home for that right hook, he can keep Farmer in the position where he wouldn't kind of be able to land that weird little left hand he snagged him with, I think. And then Zepeda might be able to start walking him into his own left hand. Just my thought, but we shall see as far as that goes. Does anyone have any final thoughts before we call it a day? Fantastic. Well, I'd very much like to thank
Matt, just a small little thing. You got the debut of Pat Brown.
Oh, wait. And I got something on the screen there too. Go ahead. Keep going.
Yeah, you got the debut of Pat Brown, who is a cruiserweight coming out of Manchester. Matchroom put a lot of promotion behind him, some hopes behind him as well too, coming off of the latest Olympic cycle. He's exciting in his style, definitely a pro type of style. If you haven't seen him, for some of the Americans, maybe we've not seen what he's like. Best I can sort of give you style wise is sort of like Richard Torres, fights like that sort of style coming out of Olympics himself as well too. So we'll see how he gets on in the cruiserweight division. He seems a little bit maybe small, at least from the clips I've seen of him for the cruiserweight division. But in that, he brings an exciting style. So I look forward to seeing a bit more new blood being introduced into a scene which is dying for a star in Manchester. So,
what card is that on?
I think it's like a next gen card. Okay. I think he's the headliner, or maybe it's Cameron Vaughn versus Jordan Flynn, which is a longer awaited fight. It's fallen out a couple of times because Jordan Flynn's been injured, but they're fighting as well too. And I think Connor Tudsbury as well is. A lot of people seem to think he's got a high ceiling as well. So a next gen type of fight card. But the real interest is in Pat Brown and how he gets on in the pros.
Yeah, next Sunday you're gonna have Konstantin Ursu in a fight there too. Been following that kid since a random look for something in the prediction league, and he keeps winning. Yeah, gonna have that going on simultaneously with the podcast. Next Sunday. But Saturday morning, Bobsy put this in the chat, and thank you for this. This is a good reminder. He says Ayala versus Yabuki for the IBF flyweight title is the fight of the week coming, and he might be right. Ayala coming into that fight undefeated. He definitely has some holes in his resume. Yabuki, the only guy with a victory over Kenshiro Taraji. He's moving up after taking the 108 belt from Nochinga to test the waters here at 112. Which would be it'd be very interesting to see how he comes through this one. He is a slight favorite over Ayala, but Yabuki is absolutely a banger. Since that loss to Taraji in the rematch, he's reeled off 4 stoppage victories in a row. So yeah, definitely looking forward to this one from Japan on Saturday morning, Saturday lunchtime for you Brits. So yeah, this should be a fairly decent weekend of boxing all in all. And I'm telling you, the month of April is going to be fantastic. There's a lot of stuff to look forward in that one. I'd like to thank Beatbot Boop for throwing us a couple in there and keeping the lights on. Very much appreciated there, my friend. And I would like to thank Justin, Dez, and Seconds Out's Eamon Khan for joining us today on the Boxing Asylum Nuthouse. We'll see you next week. And again, this episode for the memory of Big George Foreman. We lost him this past week, an absolute legend in the sport. There will never be anyone like Big George again. The condolences to his family, his friends, everyone whose lives he's touched. Big George, thanks for the memories. Thanks for the great fights. And thank you all for listening. I've been your host, Matt DiGianardo, and we will see you folks next week.
We'll never forget.
How did that happening?
Go to animals!
We want to be honest, yeah?
Crying like a little bitch. I've never met a fucking swank that can fight me.
I fell asleep. I fell asleep.
You're a fucking bum, you're a fucking asshole.
Rumple fucking Steltskin.
But allegedly, Oscar Rivas has failed a test.
7-year ain't. 7-year ain't.
I will fucking smash fucking you.
I hope you fucking die.
Be safe.
I love boxing sounds. Simple as that.
So your brother.